Which one was that?
The first one.
Well, Williams,
Warehouse.
the LPC warehouse, yeah. Did they bring product?
Yeah, that was just,
Had a lively
but what a
discussion.
great process, it didn't need me at all, so.
I read it, didn't jump out at me like that. Yeah.
Carl, we have two Greater New York, we have two Greater New York partners in the audience today. Weco and Amy Peterson from the first round. Isn't that interesting?
And former commissioner, Annalisa Torres.
Oh.
Haven't seen her in a long time.
Good morning and welcome to the City Planning Public Hearing. And Madam Secretary, please begin.
Good morning. This is the City Planning Commission public meeting held in Spector Hall, 22 Reed Street. Today is Wednesday, June 3rd, 2015. As a courtesy during the proceedings, we ask that you please turn off all cell phones and beepers. All speakers should fill out a speaker's card at the desk outside of Spector Hall. In addition, we ask that those providing testimony please identify yourself, limit your remarks to 3 minutes, and speak clearly into the microphone. I will now call the roll. Chairman Weisbrod.
Here.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Here,
Commissioner Besser. Here. Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Here.
Commissioner Delauss.
Here.
Commissioner Dweck.
Here.
Commissioner Edie. Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Jung. Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Marin. Commissioner Ortiz. A quorum is present. The first item is the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of Wednesday, May 20th, 2015.
On the minutes, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, the minutes are approved.
Scheduling. On calendar numbers 1 through 7, we have resolutions for adoption. Scheduling Wednesday, June 17, 2015, for a public hearing to be held in Spector Hall, 22 Reed Street.
On the resolutions, all in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Madam Secretary, the resolutions are approved.
The next part of the calendar is the report section on page 14. Borough of Brooklyn, calendar number 8, CD 16, N150353 HKK, in the matter of a communication regarding a landmark designation of the Brooklyn Public Library, Stone Avenue Branch, on the adoption of calendar number 8 for referral to the City Council. Chairman Weisbrod.
Aye.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes,
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Jung.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Marin. Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 8 has been adopted. Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 9, CD1, N150350 PXM, in the matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for use of property located at 375 Pearl Street. For a favorable report on calendar number 9, Chairman Weisbrod.
Aye.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
yes,
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Jung.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Marin. Commissioner Ortiz. A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 9. Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 10, CD1, N150351 PXM, in the matter of a notice of intent to acquire office space for use of property located at 90 West Street. For a favorable report on calendar number 10, Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
yes,
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Jung.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin. Commissioner Marin. Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 10. Borough of Queens, calendar number 11, CD5, C150218 PSQ, in the matter of an application for the site selection of properties concerning the Newtown Creek East Branch facility. For a favorable report on calendar number 11, Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles,
yes,
Commissioner Besser,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo, okay, Commissioner Cantor,
Always there for grand entrance.
I've never seen him come in that side of the room ever.
okay. Okay. Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss?
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck?
Yes.
Commissioner Edie?
Yes, and I'd also like to record it, yes,
Will
for
do.
8 and 9.
Okay.
And prior.
Commissioner Efron?
Yes.
Commissioner Jung?
Yes.
Commissioner Levin?
Yes.
Commissioner Marin?
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz?
Yes.
A favorable report has been adopted on calendar number 11. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 12, CD3, N150242 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 466 Correll Avenue for adoption on calendar number 12. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chair Knuckles.
Yes.
Commissioner Besser.
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor. Commissioner Cerullo.
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss.
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck.
Yes.
Commissioner Edie.
Yes.
Commissioner Efron.
Yes.
Commissioner Jung.
Yes.
Commissioner Levin.
Yes.
Commissioner Marin.
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 12 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 13, CD3, N150244 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 139 Ocean View Place for adoption on calendar number 13. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser,
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Efron,
Yes.
Commissioner Jung,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 13 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 14, CD3, N150245 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 404 Manhattan Street for adoption on calendar number 14. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser,
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Efron,
Yes.
Commissioner Jung,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 14 has been adopted. Borough of Staten Island, calendar number 15, CD3, N150283 RCR, in the matter of an application for the grant of a certification concerning 314 Wilson Avenue for adoption on calendar number 15. Chairman Weisbrod,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Knuckles,
Yes.
Commissioner Besser,
Yes.
Commissioner Cantor,
Yes.
Commissioner Cerullo,
Yes.
Commissioner Delauss,
Yes.
Commissioner Dweck,
Yes.
Commissioner Edie,
Yes.
Commissioner Efron,
Yes.
Commissioner Jung,
Yes.
Commissioner Levin,
Yes.
Commissioner Marin,
Yes.
Commissioner Ortiz.
Yes.
Calendar number 15 has been adopted. The next part of the calendar is the public hearing section on page 18. Borough of the Bronx, calendar number 16 and 17. Calendar number 16, CD3, C150303, ZSX. Calendar number 17, C150306, HAX. A public hearing in the matter of application for the grant of a special permit, UDAP designation, project approval, disposition of city-owned property concerning Melrose Commons North Site B, excuse me.
The first speaker is Winifred Campbell from HPD.
16, 17.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Winifred Campbell, representative of the applicant HPD. Earlier this year, I was before you excited about presenting to you Melrose Commons North RFP Site C. If I was excited then, I'm ecstatic today because I'm presenting to you Melrose Commons North RFP Site B, also known as Bronx Commons. I am ecstatic because the site is the last large residential urban renewal site to be developed in the Melrose Commons urban renewal area. As we discussed at the earlier public hearing, the designation of the Melrose Commons urban renewal area was approved by the Commission in 1994. The urban renewal area is approximately 46 contiguous acres in the center of the South Bronx. New construction began in 2000, and about 3,000 new construction units have been completed in the area. We also presented at the Site C public hearing that in 2008, HPD issued an RFP for 3 large sites in the urban renewal area, and developers were designated for each site. Site A was pretty straightforward without any issues. That site is now developed and occupied. Sites B and C had unique site issues that took an extensive amount of time to resolve. Site C has now completed ULURP, and we anticipate closing the project this month. Before you today is Site B, Bronx Commons. It is located on Elton and Washington Avenues between 162nd and 163rd Street. It will provide 276 rental affordable units plus 1 supers unit. The development will also include community facility space as well as ground floor commercial. As part of the Site C application, the Commission has already approved 3 actions which facilitates the development of Site C as well as Bronx Commons. Those approved actions are city map change, zoning map amendment, and an urban renewal amendment. The actions before you today for Bronx Commons are the approval of the disposition and UDAP designation and the approval of a special permit to allow development over an abandoned railroad right-of-way. The community board and the borough president are very supportive of this project. We request your approval of these actions to facilitate Bronx Commons. Members of the development team are here to present the project more comprehensively, and they will be able to answer more detailed and technical questions. I am available to answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Campbell. Questions for Ms. Campbell? Ms. Levin?
Winifred, if you're ecstatic, we're ecstatic. That's, you hardly ever hear HPD getting so enthusiastic, so it's got to be a good thing. Actually, I don't have a question so much about this project as about the planned open space on the adjacent site to the west.
Okay.
As HPD is the guardian of the urban renewal plan, and I understand that space is designated as open space in the urban renewal plan.
That's correct.
If this is if the Bronx Commons is the last development piece, how is the open space going to be accomplished?
Okay, so the site to the west of the Bronx Commons site is an urban renewal site, which the land use designation is public open space. So it is the intent to eventually turn that site over to Parks for development. At this time, that site is not part of Parks' capital budget, so the development team has agreed to lessen the blight of the site until there is such a transfer to Parks, and perhaps the speakers of the development team can get into more detail about what that blight eliminating plan is.
Okay, okay, but it's fundamentally a Parks project to, the
The
long-term
future-
build
that's
out of
right.
that space
That's
is
right.
a Parks project.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
Along the same lines, is there a year when you anticipate that it will be in Parks' budget, or it will be transferred to Parks? Is it anticipated when this site is completed, or?
No. I do know that it is currently not in Parks's, I would even go as far as to say 5-year capital plan, so it would be sometime after that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Ms. Campbell? Ms. Ortiz?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
I have some questions, and I know there'll probably be other speakers who can address some of the issues revolving around the retail space. I'm curious how you have approached thinking about that space. I know that, HPD is currently looking at the design of ground floor retail, and has that exercise influenced the design of this space at all?
I believe that it has, and again, the hope is that we're going to have retail that will increase the pedestrian traffic in the area and liven the street life in the area, but again, the development team will speak more specifically to that.
Okay. And also a follow-up on the question about the open space. It's hard to tell sort of what the building will look like on that side. I'm sort of looking for a rendering or you know, what will be the treatment on the
I'm going to
site?
defer to a member of the development team to
Okay.
answer that.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions, Ms. Campbell? Ms. Jung?
This is no question. This is just, I wanted to congratulate HPD and the amazing stewardship of all of the work that's gone on here. This is, I think it's really, you can't really overstate the impact that this area has had. And certainly also from a sustainability perspective, this area has had so many of the firsts that have happened in green building in not only in affordable housing, but in the city. Including the first place where the city sort of tested out the green policy that is now in force. And so I'm just also really excited. So congratulations.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Campbell. You'll probably never get as good a reception. Next speaker is Les Bluestone.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Les Bluestone, I'm representing Blue Sea Development Company, which is one half of the development team along with WEDCO of the project. And I'm going to give you a little description of the building structure and some of the systems as part of my presentation. The building is, as you can see, sort of a trapezoidal U-shaped building. It ranges in height from 1 story up to 12 with a few setbacks, the residential being 6, 8, and 12-story buildings. The building is constructed of precast wall panels, precast floor. This is a system that we've used in the Melrose area and throughout the city successfully, and it lends to great energy efficiency and air tightness. The building will be enrolled in LEED. It will be attempting to achieve a gold status. We have 4 buildings in the Bronx right now, which were built in the last 5 years, which have all achieved LEED Platinum status. So we're shooting low for gold, but we hope to achieve platinum here as well. It's also, I said, National Green Building Standard and Energy Star as well program. The building is a smoke-free building as a part of these programs as well. We have a number of systems that are not so innovative now, but were at one point in time in terms of ventilation systems, and we do use cogeneration in all of our buildings. That will be here as well. In general, our buildings have in the past, and we expect this one to achieve also, the last 3 buildings have been 30% more efficient than ASHRAE 90.1 of 2007, which probably means something to Commissioner Jung, but maybe no one else. And the building does have a variety of space. One of the highlights is a rooftop urban farm, which is something that we did on another building not too far away in Morrisania, where we have it's a community facility by virtue of the fact that we require the operator of the farm to set aside 40% of their produce for distribution into the community through CSA and through other documented means, and we get reports on that to verify that. And I'm open for questions if anybody has any.
Any questions for Mr. Bluestone? Mr. Knuckles.
The urban farm, I assume that's in the rendering, that's the area that's enclosed?
Yes, showing here, yes.
Okay. Could you tell me a little bit about the Bronx Heritage Music Center, which I think is a great idea? What's the nature of their occupancy? Is it a tenancy, or will they own the space? What will that look like?
Other parts of our team will come up and can give you more detail on the use for that community facility space.
All right.
Ms. Sean.
Hi. So, oh, I'm not on. Hi. Yes, thank you for being here. So I have sort of 2 questions. One is if you could share some of the metrics that you're anticipating, like heating index, site energy use intensity, and gallons per bedroom. If you don't have it at the top of your mind.
No, I mean, I can give you projections. I can give you some examples. I think our energy utilization index in our last 3 buildings, that we were about, I want to say about 40 40,000 BTUs per square foot, which is, pretty good overall. And we hope to do at least as well here.
And excuse me, do you have any sense of heating index, what you might expect there?
I don't have that figure off the top of my head.
And then the other question is, I'm familiar with some of the other projects that you have done, and I would like to know is there something that your team is trying here that is sort of pushing the envelope that you're really excited about?
Sure. I think the biggest thing for us is the envelope. The systems are they're great today, but they change, weekly, monthly, yearly. So we're really trying to focus on the envelope. We just, in fact, just had our first air test on another precast project that we're doing in Brooklyn, and it was our tightest building to date. So we're really encouraged by that, and we expect to do that here as well. The insulation thermal break, we're increasing up to R15, plus the interior bat insulation as well. So we think that those combinations will be great.
Great, thank you.
Ms. Delos.
Les, thanks for being here.
Sure.
I'm wondering, because of the different uses that are in the building, and in particular, the Heritage Center, not so much to talk about it from the perspective of what it will bring to the neighborhood, but what it means for the construction of the building. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
And how you're making sure that the residents aren't negatively impacted by that use?
Sure. The systems are definitely, they're separate systems, obviously, for all sorts of reasons. And the negative impact, if there is any negative impact to a mixed-use building, is the location of equipment. So there are two ways that we handle that. One is that you locate it where it's the least offensive. That's just the obvious thing. And there are lots of equipment choices now that are far superior in terms of noise and objectionable results that weren't available a few years ago, which we plan on using here. And efficiency is the key, too. And those kind of go hand in hand with the better equipment.
Ms. Levin.
Following up on that, as long as you're mentioning building systems, if a restaurant or food use is contemplated in any of the commercial spaces, are there systems for ventilation that will keep the nasty stuff away from residents?
If we do, there is plan to locate the equipment up at the roof, so that ventilation would be included in that as well.
Okay, so you are planning to ventilate the commercial space?
Yes,
for
yes.
food use?
If it ends, we don't know that we're going to end up with a food use, but if that's, we do have provisions for chases to allow for that to happen.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Efron.
Thank you. Because this is part of a larger community and seems to be an incredibly robust and exciting community in the Bronx, are there plans to have the CSA distribute to the rest of the community, and is there space to do that in the project as it's contemplated?
Well, as soon as you guys want to fix the zoning resolution that allows us to have points of sale, we're happy to do that.
I just meant as part of a co-op.
Yeah, we're not allowed to buy, as a community facility, we're not allowed to have a point of sale, and we're not allowed to do anything at the building. But in terms of distributing to other CSAs, that can be done, and that is being done right now. So we can't bring, to put it simply, we can't bring people to the building, but can we ship the produce outside the building? Yes, and that is being done at the other farm that we have.
Thank you.
Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Could you speak a little bit to sort of, I'm interested in the ground floor conditions and the connection of the retail and the community spaces to the street. Could you speak to sort of the evolution of your thinking about the ground floor space? I understand that initially, you thought about a grocery store. What sort of happened with that piece? I know there's a grocery store across the street being contemplated, and where do you anticipate going with this? Because my sense is that, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's a little isolated from other, you'd have to cross at least two streets to get to another retail node. And so how do you contemplate overcoming some of those challenges?
Well, we did originally contemplate a supermarket, and as you pointed out, we became aware of plans across the street for a supermarket being built, so that kind of nixed that idea. And other team members can speak more to the retail. But in terms of location, HPD in the RFP made it clear that energizing the street was an important component of the RFP. So we're trying to, find a use. We have a number of possibilities, but as you know, retail is not always the easiest thing to do in affordable housing developments. But we have a number of great options, nothing solid enough to say this is what it's going to be. So we tried to leave the space flexible, as I mentioned, allowing for chases to go up to the roof. Should it be a cafe or should it be a restaurant or some food operation? But we have nothing defined as of yet, nothing that was locked down. And in terms of crossing the street also, the site is what it is. The activities that we hope to present are going to be enough of a destination that people will cross the street.
And just to follow up on that, it's interesting what I heard you say, which is that, the retail is there as a result of a requirement in the RFP. As a developer, if that requirement were not incorporated into the RFP, would you have included retail if, you were making a market-based decision?
In this particular location, it seems like a logical thing to do, based on what's going on around the area.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to pursue your other comment, which is that retail is daunting in affordable housing projects. And why is that? Is that because of the subsidy required? Is that because of the building configuration? Is it because of
Well, there are a few
issues or what?
Yeah, there are a few issues that come up. One, the demographics typically, is an issue. I don't know if any of you have been to the ICSC before. When you go to you tell them what you want to do, they open up a book, they look at the demographics, they slam it, and they say, well, that's nice, call us when it's done. So that tends to be a result from major credit tenants. Now, there are certainly lots of local tenants that are not credit rated that, we would, like to attract because this is their community. Then it becomes sometimes a financing issue because the lenders are looking for certain guarantees that maybe are not available through these tenants.
So it's essentially an economic issue rather than a building configuration
Correct.
or zoning issue.
Correct.
And what about not-for-profits and particularly not-for-profits that can afford to pay a market rent as ground floor activity uses that both support the tenants in the building, occupants in the building, as well as the surrounding community? Are they better credit risks? Are they easier to configure space for, or do they present similar issues?
Well, the space is certainly generally easier to configure if it were talking about offices. One of the things that we are trying to do is create some energy on the street, through the Bronx Music Heritage Center and through the retail by making it a destination. So there are certain types of uses we think that do that better than others, and some of them may fall under, the domain of a not-for-profit, some may not.
Thank you. Mr. Cantor.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Bluestone. Question, please. The facility on the roof, what kind of traffic does it generate?
It's not open to the public. The one that we have now currently on Morrisania has, depending on the time, anywhere from 6 to 8 employees.
And what about when they've got to take the material down, the products down? Have you had to increase your elevator?
They have a separate elevator.
They have a separate elevator?
Yes, they do.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Bluestone? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
The next speaker is Kerry McLean from WEDCO. And I thought I saw Judge Torres, who's the chair of WEDCO and a former distinguished member of this commission. So welcome, Judge Torres. And Judge Torres is, I believe, now federal district judge. There's hope for all of us. To move on to greater things. Thank you very much. Ms. McLean.
Good morning. My name is Carrie McLean, and I'm the Director of Community Development at the Women's Housing and Economic Development Corporation, WEDCO. So I want to assure you all that there is retail demand in Melrose. Bronx Commons is a mixed-use development that will add life to the last vacant corner of the Melrose urban renewal area. WEDCO works with multiple city agencies to create conditions that will attract new retail to the neighborhoods where we build. With the city's critical housing investment, we have the opportunity to attract quality retail and cultivate a vibrant street life for residents of Bronx Commons and the larger neighborhood. I'd like to talk about WEDCO's retail strategy in Melrose and the steps we've already taken to implement the strategy. WEDCO has undertaken a comprehensive community planning process to understand area assets and needs. We've walked the streets around the Bronx Commons site to conduct block-by-block surveys of land use and retail mix. We've mapped existing retail inventory and services. We conducted a retail needs analysis and found that Melrose residents spend $403 million outside of their neighborhood each year because they cannot find what they need closer to home. We've held community planning meetings and surveyed 1,000 local residents who told us they wanted restaurants, cultural and community centers, and more retail. Residents also want more options for recreation and exercise. Based on the data we gathered, we've been actively prospecting retail tenants for the 25,000 square feet of commercial space at Bronx Commons. Thus far, we've attracted interest from several restaurants, full-service banks, and a bookstore. We're pleased to have received renewed award support from the New York City Department of Small Business Services to update our retail market data and create marketing materials we need to entice prospective retailers. The adjacent 15,000 square foot community facility, the Bronx Music Heritage Center, will be a hub for music and dance that will further address the needs identified. Since culture and commerce reinforce each other, we see Bronx Commons as a community hub anchored by the destination retail it will create. As affirmed by Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz Jr., Bronx Commons will bring together a comprehensive vision for residential, cultural, and commercial functions. Next from our team, Elena Martinez of the Bronx Music Heritage Center and David Carofano of Local Projects will tell you more about the community facilities programming and design. Then our architect, Guido Hartre of Marvel Architects, and Nancy Bieberman, WEDCO's president, will conclude the development team's presentation. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about our retail strategy.
Thank you, Ms. McLean. Questions? Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, Carrie, good
Hi,
to see
Larissa.
you. You know, I'll ask you a question I had asked a little earlier. You know, there's this space, is there 20,000, over 20,000 square feet, 26,000 square feet of space anticipated? Are you thinking about a single user, multiple users, and you know, to what extent? One of my concerns is that it's somewhat isolated from other retail in the area. You'd have to cross some streets, and you know, sometimes that's a challenge. I'd be curious if you share any of these concerns, or if you've thought through that, because you know, obviously we want business to be successful at that location. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yes. So this part of Melrose has really grown a lot just because of the extensive housing investment that's happened in the neighborhood. So within a half mile, we've done analyses of the quarter mile, a half mile, and 1 mile radius around the Bronx Commons site. And within a half mile, there are over 50,000 people who live in that neighborhood now. And in the 1 mile trade area, it's over 200,000 people. So within the quarter mile and a half mile of the Bronx Commons site, that demand is very high. The unmet retail demand is very high, and in fact, I will tell you what it is. The unmet retail demand, well, within the 1 mile area, as I mentioned before, it's $403 million per year. So we know that even though the goal really is, as Les mentioned earlier, to really activate the ground floor space and respond to the unmet needs of the community, and that retail and ground floor space will, with the destination retail that we're trying to attract, will serve to provide response to those needs.
So, I guess you mentioned the 1 mile, the gap in the 1 mile. This is not a lot of space. It's 26,000 square feet, so it's likely you'll be looking at a much more local market, probably very convenience oriented. What kinds of uses would you like to see there or envision? You mentioned a bank. I guess it's a concern for me, given that you want to activate the space, and that was a stated goal here. What kinds of uses would you like to see there, or do you think would be most viable?
So we're looking at a diversity of uses, and just to go back to your earlier question, we are looking at multiple possibilities, not necessarily just one retailer. We recognize that for the 25,000 square feet of space, and in this area too, that there is a demand from local prospective entrepreneurs as well as people beyond the local area for not 25,000 square feet of space, but smaller size spaces. And so we're willing to do that with the right type of tenant. So the goal really is to attract multiple tenants to the area. And as mentioned before, we've already secured interest and are cultivating, restaurants who have indicated that they are interested in the neighborhood. The bank would be another possibility, not the sole possibility, of course. So it would be to try to have complementary uses that are bringing people to that section of Melrose, as well as to the building itself. And then, as mentioned earlier, too, the Bronx Music Heritage Center is another destination on this same site that will also generate foot traffic.
Yeah, I just mentioned that because, the ability to create a fantastic synergy that will enliven that public space is going to be really critical here, and the retail that you are able to attract will play a role in that. So, good luck.
Thank you.
Any other questions to Ms. McLean? Ms. Levin?
Ms. McLean, we heard from Ms. Campbell about the open space to the west, and you mentioned that your study revealed an appetite in the neighborhood for open space. It's certainly disappointing that the city isn't able to commit the resources needed to fully realize the plans for that open space, but Ms. Campbell indicated that you all had some interim plans. Are you the correct person to ask about that, or is it one of the other speakers?
I think Nancy, our president, will follow up on that one.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Efron?
Hi, can you just point out where the retail is? I understand it's more than just where the canopied tables are. So if you could just show us on the map.
Sure.
Thank you.
There's retail here and also on this side.
Okay.
Offices retail.
And is there any concern you have about the retail that is past the plaza, assuming that the entryway is through the plaza? And has there been great success in the immediately adjacent neighborhoods with plaza entry retail?
Well, on 163rd Street, this is actually a pretty busy thoroughfare. And on this side of the street, the supermarket that we mentioned earlier is going to be right across the street. So we know that there is going to be foot traffic that's also generated between those two uses on the 163rd side of the street. The retail space that is right here adjacent to the plaza is next to the Bronx Music Heritage Center. So we see culture and commerce really driving each other and really pulling foot traffic between the cultural institution and the commercial space.
Okay, so I guess we'll hear from the Music Heritage Center people about the hours they intend to keep and how that helps the retail. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Cantor, then Ms. Delos.
Thank you. Talking about the traffic, where will the loading and unloading for items coming in and waste going out, where will that be done?
I believe that on the 163rd side of the street is envisioned loading and unloading for the commercial spaces.
Is that a loading dock, or is it anticipated on-street?
There will be a loading dock
There
anticipated.
will be a loading
Yes.
dock. Would that be the loading dock that the facility on the roof will also use?
I will defer that to Nancy Bieberman. She will answer that question.
Because I'm curious as to how they get up and down. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Ms. Delos?
I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you all may divide the space up for multiple commercial tenants, and what have you already pre-thought or considered as part of the construction plan, and what might be an ideal scenario?
So as Les mentioned earlier, we really want this space to be as flexible as possible. One of the reasons why even 2 years and even more than 2 years before the building is built that we have been working on this retail strategy is try to cultivate interest beforehand so that we can secure retail tenants and therefore be able, by the time we're constructing, to design it out to fit those retail tenants. So that is the goal, is to identify operators as quickly as possible and to adjust the space accordingly.
So you have a scenario that it's 25,000 square feet, one that's, how many different scenarios do you have in terms of what it might look like?
So based on the needs and the interest in the neighborhood, food uses are definitely one of those things that's in high demand in the area. So we're looking at dividing up, if the possibilities are to divide up the space to accommodate different types of food uses, as well as mention the possible bank institution and others that might come online as real firm prospects.
So what's the smallest square footage that you envision potentially providing?
So based on the demand thus far, we have gotten interest from prospective retailers who are looking for up to 1,500 square feet of space. So the smallest would be about 1,500.
That's quite a bit of division. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ms. McLean. The next speaker is Elena Martinez.
Hi, good morning. My name is Elena Martinez. I'm the co-artistic director of the Bronx Music Heritage Center, along with jazz musician Bobby Sanabria. I'm also a folklorist at City Lore and a proud Bronx resident. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the BMHC, the Bronx Music Heritage Center, does. It's a nonprofit founded by WEDCO and committed to preserving and promoting the musical legacy of the Bronx. Many forms of popular music and cutting-edge music have deeply rooted histories in the Bronx. Everyone knows that hip-hop was born in the Bronx. The Bronx is called the borough of salsa, but jazz, Latin jazz, gospel, doo-wop, many traditional forms of music have flourished in the borough for decades. One of the reasons they were able to flourish was that there was this great infrastructure of theaters, clubs, social clubs that were able to accommodate the musical performances. And of course, of what happened in the 60s and 70s and 80s, we lost a lot of buildings. So many places where people could listen to live music and go dance have been lost. But to this day, many artists and musicians from many different cultural backgrounds still make the Bronx their home and are finding ways to still apply their trade in music and make the Bronx their home. So we've created the BMHC to connect underserved Bronx residents to the borough's musical past and its current cultural innovators. Since 2010, we've offered free concerts, classes, and residencies in the temporary space that's currently in WEDCO's Intervale Green building. Along with the musical genres I've mentioned earlier, we've also presented the music and culture of many of the new immigrant groups of the borough, including the Dominican community, the Ghanaian community, the Garifuna community of Central America, and the Quechua-speaking Ecuadorian community that is growing in the Bronx. We've also honored many Bronx musical legends in our series called Living Legends, like people like DJ Kool Herc, who is one of the founders of hip-hop, as well as Andy Gonzalez, the most recorded bass player in Latin music. So with all of this, we've been able to offer 250 days of programming each year, bringing in over 5,000 audience members annually. We hope that the new BMHC, which will have its new home at Bronx Commons, will be not just a destination for local Bronx sites, but also a New York City destination. We will continue to offer live music and dance performances, along with classes, exhibits, and all sorts of different programming for artists of all ages. Most of us on the Music Advisory Board, which I'm also a part of, are Bronx musicians or make our home in the Bronx, and we all feel that this will bring a tremendous sense of pride in where we're from and where we look to keep working in the Bronx, in the neighborhood, and in the Bronx. We look forward to opening our doors to visitors from the Bronx, from the city, and beyond to experience and celebrate the music of the Bronx. Thank you. I can take any questions that you have.
Thank you, Ms. Martinez. Questions? Ms. Deluz.
You said a lot in a very short period of time. No, it's really, I mean, when you said 250 days of programming a year, that's incredible, honestly, to be able to offer that on such a consistent basis. I'm just wondering, what will it take in terms of financial support in order to have the center operate year after year? And how much of that has already been raised, or are you in the process of raising?
That's been ongoing, and I'm actually going to just defer that to the President, Nancy Bieberman, when she comes on any sort of funding and budget issues.
Okay. And I have a follow-up question. I'm just wondering, are you thinking that there might be any special relationship between the museum and the building's residents?
Yes, there will be a portion of the units will be set aside for elderly musicians in the residential area. And so the elderly musicians, which is a needed thing, many artists don't have safety net for many different things, whether it's medical or housing. So that will be set aside for elderly musicians. And we hope that there'll be that we can create partnerships that the musicians might be able to do residencies or, work in master classes in some of the programming in the cultural center.
Thank you.
Ms. Efron.
I just want to applaud WEDCO's always creative outlook on portions of the population that are often ignored, whether it's older actors or older musicians. And I do have questions. I suppose I'll wait to ask Nancy Bieberman about regarding the finances and also the relative size of this, which is quite large. But, excuse me, I did wonder whether there's any opportunity or you saw any opportunity for elderly specific needs in the retail that might be realized since there will be an elderly focus to some degree, or a specialty elderly focus in the building population.
So you mean in the retail itself? I know we've talked a lot about the retail. I know it came up earlier that how will the center and retail work together. When we've had talks with some of the retail that like restaurant owners and stuff, that we want to make sure that our programming can maybe complement their programming in terms of when we're done with the program, people can go and eat or see other performances afterwards. But as far as things for elderly seniors, I'm not sure. I'd have to defer that to Nancy as well, how that would be answered.
Any other questions to Ms. Martinez? Thank you very much.
Thanks.
The next speaker is David Corafaro. Is that correct?
Actually, just going to move this one over here so this one a little bit better. Morning. Thank you for having me here. It's an honor to be here, and us as well are very excited to be part of this project. My name is David Carafano. I'm from Local Projects. We're a media and exhibit design studio, and our work is really focused on the integration of technology, design, and architecture in public spaces. You may be familiar with some of our work with the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum, the 9/11 Museum Memorial, and the Cleveland Museum of Art. Just a little bit about our process as a design studio. Our name, Local Projects, is based on the term that all design is local. So we really, and what we started to do in this process early on is engage with the board members, the staff, and even some of the community members to figure out a vision for what this space will actually be. It's important to note this is not just the museum, it's not just a static exhibit, it's a space that sort of lives and breathes and grows as the community grows as well. So just in terms of some of the design features, as you can see, the space is very open. It has this really feeling of accessibility and vibrancy. It's bold and dynamic. The only way that this space really works is that people feel comfortable going in there. They feel like they're welcome there, they're invited in there. This is a space where I belong as a community member. So just to talk a little bit more about the features, the building itself will serve as a canvas for commissioned artwork. So as you're seeing here, in this space here, would be just a representation for right now, but I believe the Heritage Center will commission local artists to create works for that space. Layered on top of that is this dynamic lighting structure that we've created. It's really interactive with this space, so it measures activity in the space, sound volumes, and you could really see this coming to life at night for the community and for the space. During the day, it might be a little bit more transparent and less visible. It's important to note that this will also be used with discretion and respectful of the neighborhood as well, so only limited hours during the day or for specific events so that it's not too intrusive of the neighborhood. The public plaza space is a performance space with amphitheater-style seating and stage, with additional movable bleacher seating in the back. We imagine the capacity to be around 200 to 250 people. And you have this sculpture here that reads, "This is Bronx Music." We really wanted to create something sort of iconic and have sort of stature for the neighborhood that people would come and see, take pictures with, it would draw it almost as an attraction to the space. And then in terms of our next phases in our process going forward, we really want to take that same approach and engage with the board members and the staff members and the community and the architects to really come up with a vision for the interior of the space. So there will be exhibits that are historical and about Bronx history of music, but it's also an opportunity to really define an experience around civic engagement and around community engagement, really to think about how the space operates that way and what type of experiences we can create to bring to life the incredible programming that they already do in the space. So yeah, I will take any questions from there.
Questions? Mr. Cantor?
Thank you. Can you speak to the issue of lighting and how it will affect the unit owners as well as noise?
Sure.
Are those windows double glazed, or what provisions have you made
Yeah.
to minimize the impact upon the homeowner?
Sure. I mean, I can't speak to the overall structure of the building and the windows, but I will say we thought a lot about the lighting and how it might work with the neighborhood, and again, using it respectfully and not to intrude on the community and the neighbors. Just using it for specific events where there's a lot of activity currently already going on, or like I said, only between certain hours of the day, so that it's not, a distraction.
Would that include evening programs?
Correct, yeah.
Nighttime programs?
Correct.
Mr. Cirillo?
Just as a follow-up to that question, so what's not clear, and I think it's really creative and
Mhm.
interesting, and I think it could create a really nice energy in the neighborhood, does the lighting cross the windows?
No, it wouldn't
Or is it
intrude.
around
Yeah,
the way- okay,
yeah, it
it's-
wouldn't intrude. And this is also just an early rendering. The scale of this could be brought back. It could not go as high. It could not go as wide. So the scalability of this is still open for discussion as well.
Okay.
Ms. Levin?
Yeah, just following up on that, so much of what you have to say is very exciting. I feel like kind of a downer for raising these issues, but,
No worries.
there are city zoning rules about illuminated signs shining into residential windows. They're prohibited. I assume that you've taken that into
Yeah, I think.
account.
Sure. I think all of that is definitely under our consideration, and as we move forward in the process, determining what more of the regulations and the restrictions are that we can apply to the actual building. But the idea is that this is a space that we want people to see from afar and draw people in and really act as like this sort of pulse of the neighborhood. So that's the idea behind the lighting structure. We'll figure out the restrictions and how to make this more applicable for the environment as we go further.
all a good impulse. But I also wanted to ask about the performance space.
Sure.
Same issue. It's going to be underneath a bunch of residential windows, and by its very nature, this music is exuberant and loud and late into the night, and maybe it's more of a programming issue, but you must have thought about it in planning it as a performance space. How is that going to coexist with the residents?
Yeah, it's a great question. I will defer. I know that to Nancy when she comes up. I know that they do current programming with large festivals and events currently in their neighborhood where they are now. So she might have a little bit more insight on how the zoning and the regulations work with that.
Quality of life for the residents. Okay, good, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Ms. Efron?
I too am very excited, but don't want to be a downer, but where many of us see musical amphitheater, and I do have a question about where you're going to store bleachers, but others may see skateboard park. So I just urge you to keep in mind public safety and
Definitely.
all the other aspects that accessible public plazas bring.
Absolutely. No, I think we definitely think about sort of the safety of the space, and we want people to sort of make it their own when there's not programming going on. Obviously, there would be some restrictions around skateboarding or maybe doing activities that are not safe.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Guido Hartray.
Hello, my name is Guido Hartray. I'm a partner of Marvel Architects, and we're the architects of record for this project. And I will touch on a few of the questions that have been brought up, and then can go on into greater detail as on anything that you want further clarification on. So I think there was one. There were some questions about the loading access, and so yes, there is one loading bay here, which is required for the commercial space. The other, there also were questions about the how the performance venue and the residents, how those things don't interfere with each other. And I think that there are a couple things there. We put the main residential entrance off 162nd. This is really the kind of quieter residential street. And so it is actually, it's removed from the plaza and has its own kind of quieter area surrounding its entrance. Also, the site allowed us to do some things with the massing of the building that will help on some of that noise constraints. I think that the noise from performance in the plaza is something that can certainly be addressed through the tight envelope that Les was talking about, and also through just the kind of scheduling of that. And I'm sure Nancy will talk more about that. But I think the other thing that is always a concern with this is noise from an interior performance space. And so the main performance venue is located here. So it's actually detached from the residential. And that was a way to both give the center a certain amount of autonomy as a kind of physical presence in the neighborhood, but also eliminated some of those interferences. I think one other thing that I would just say, just kind of as a general description about the building, is the intent was really to take advantage of some of the peculiar conditions of this site and stay low here at this kind of tight interior corner, and then step up slowly on 162nd, which is really the lower scaled street, and then continue to step up. There was a question about the facade to the park. So that's another residential facade, which will have windows and look not that much different from these facades here. And then kind of step up to the highest scale on the kind of busiest intersection with the plaza. With that, I'll answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hartray. Questions? Mr. Cantor.
I live in a community where I look down upon the pool area and the event area. You said it will be taken care of with respect to sound and noise and attenuation and the fact that it's outside. Do you know, as yet, if any studies have been done with respect to the intrusion and the distance to the intrusion? And the reason I'm asking it, too, is normally, particularly on exterior walls, you try to create one wall from foundation to roof. And I'm just curious, are you going to have special attenuation on those walls? And will it be different from the rest of the job?
So we will have to deal with isolation of any sound that would be carried through the structure into the building. I think that the physical separation is a first step, but clearly anything else that would, you do get there are certain issues with structure carrying that noise. And so the extent to which that needs to be mitigated, we'll assess that and design it accordingly.
Are there any city requirements regarding dB?
For residents, yes.
Okay, so they would be good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ms. Efron.
Could you clear up just something that's a little confusing? There's an outside amphitheater, presumably within the 15,000 square feet of the music center. There's a performance space in there too.
Yes.
I see you nodding, that's good. What is the other use of this space inside, and how flexible is it if in fact this music program's so successful it goes off to a larger venue someday, or there is a need to change the use Is there a single entrance? What's on the inside? How does that freestanding building work?
So I'll talk about the physical characteristics, and then I think Nancy will hit the kind of program strategy. So physically, the main entrance for it's envisioned as one piece that has a performance space and it has exhibits. All of that is one community facility, which would have its main entrance off of the plaza. But the performance venue within that whole space is you come through off the plaza and underneath the building, and its performance venue is here, actually on 162nd. But the entry is off the plaza. So the exhibits in those spaces would be in the circulation space leading to the performance space.
So, okay, and that middle space is open, so you go through another entrance? I'm sorry, I'm having trouble understanding the plan. Yeah, 142. You couldn't read it. I just couldn't read the one in our packet. The print is a little small.
So, ground floor plan. So this is the entry. These are some smaller kind of lab spaces, kind of studio spaces here, kind of some administration space here, and then this is the performance venue, the kind of larger Thursman performance venue here.
And how big is that performance venue? It doesn't say how many seats. That's okay. All right, that's fine.
It would be flexible seating in any case, so it could be laid out in a number of different ways.
Thank you.
Ms. Shang.
How are you? Nice to see you. Thank you for being here. I assume that you and your firm have done other cultural projects like this. I'm wondering whether you've tackled a project where this particular mix of uses has been the programming in any of your past projects, and if any, what, if any, are the ways that you're sort of mitigating the particular concerns that come from having residential so closely, sided with a performance space.
And particularly acoustical
Well,
concerns?
generally, like circulation, just just making sure that there's you're able to sort of maintain the residential security while you've got a lot of openness to the community and what have you. I mean, I guess what I'm trying to get at is you've done cultural projects before. What experience are you bringing to from that past are you bringing to this particular project that we should keep in mind as we're listening to the answers about the acoustics and these other issues?
So I think in terms of circulation, it really, the key idea is just that there is this, the building has this very public, active front with the retail on the plaza, and then a kind of a quieter front on 162nd. So that really gives each of those spaces a separate access and kind of allows them to kind of avoids any kind of unwanted overlap. In terms of the acoustics, it really, once you do a study of how much soundborne transmission, how much structural transmission you're going to have, there are different measures that you can take. On some projects, we've created a kind of interior suspended ceiling that is kind of heavy and really prevents the sound from really getting into the structure. On this project, I think we still need to kind of do a final analysis of that based on the kind of the final structure. But we're thinking that we have a good head start to mitigate that already just by the fact that where we've had to do that before is really where we've had residences directly above event spaces. But in this case, we wouldn't have that as an issue. So it would be something that would have to be dealt with in these spaces here. But in terms of the areas that you would have the higher sound volumes, you're already dealing with a certain amount of distance and removal from the structure, so we have more options in terms of how we create that isolation.
Thank you. So, I mean, so you've seen these problems before. You've
Yes.
dealt with them successfully. You're not concerned.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions to Mr. Hartray?
Thank you.
That's a nice note to end on, Mr. Hartray. Okay, the next speaker is much ballyhooed Nancy Bieberman. All roads lead to you, Ms. Bieberman.
All right, so I'm going to ask you a question first. What would you like me to do first? Say my few more remarks or answer all the questions?
Why don't you give your remarks?
Okay,
and then
thank you.
answer.
I'm actually here just to sum up, like, what we're doing and why we're doing it, and then I'll loop back to the questions. So affordable housing in New York has come a long way from where I started 25 years ago in the Bronx. As all of you know, in the late 1980s, Mayor Koch launched an historic building program that reclaimed most of the abandoned buildings in the Bronx, and buildings rose all over the borough by the score, and families moved into these new apartments. We have come to understand over these years, however, that while housing development always results in new buildings, city housing policy has often overlooked school capacity, access to health care centers, healthy food, after-school programs, safe open space. All of these are essential elements of thriving neighborhoods. The consequences of inattention to larger community needs for those who don't win the housing lottery are individual human futures that are cut short by limited education, poor health, and inadequate economic opportunity. This administration is making an extraordinary effort, I believe, to lead a multi-agency approach to contextualize housing in this larger framework of whole neighborhood development. And to me, this is a singular achievement. The careful implementation of the housing plan, of which Bronx Commons is really one small part, offers the best hope we've ever had to get it right. The mayor's housing plan calls for housing with a mix of uses. So that's what the RFP required of us, and that's what we are proposing. Active destination retail and cultural facilities for underserved communities. Words like vibrancy and culture have not until recently been part of community development lexicon or city policy, and we hope that Bronx Commons will become an example of a new approach to housing that speaks to active public spaces, incorporating culture, commerce, fitness, and fun. I want to say a little bit, which I think will kind of loop back to some of Commissioner Efron's questions. One thing we were very careful to do in Bronx Commons, and this is about the Bronx Music's Heritage Center, is not to go about this with an if we build it, they will come. Au contraire, we have spent the last 4 years, as Elena Martinez told you, really, figuring out what kinds of programs attracted which constituencies. We know, for example, we know where people are coming from who come to our programs. They sign in. We ask for their zip codes. And we know how many people are, what percentage are local, what percentage come from the city. We know the numbers. We know what's working and what's not working. So this has been a phenomenally important time for us to test. And we have been recognized by substantial national funding from, for example, the Art Place Americas Award, which we were the only grantee in New York State last year, a $400,000 grant. I'm done with my presentation.
Thank you.
So I can get to questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Bieberman. Especially, thank you for that comprehensive introduction to your questions. So, questions, Mr. Knuckles.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And congratulations on what looks like a terrific project, but certainly the work that you've done in the Bronx as well over these years. WEDCO has really been a pivotal force. I can say that from experience. Are we to assume, since the Bronx Heritage Center is a creation of WEDCO, is it perpetual? Is it around as long as WEDCO is around? What is the nature of the presence in the building?
So the Bronx Music Heritage Center is a separately incorporated, not-for-profit, but we are its fiscal sponsor. We created it. It's our hope and expectation that it will spin off and have its own board of directors, after a few years of, startup activities. But at this time, it is, if I can put it this way, a creature of WEDCO. And we hope it will last. We hope it'll outlive us, actually.
Okay. So is it a tenant in the building, or is it, how do they occupy the space?
We expect, and again, these are things that we'll be working out with HPD, we expect there'll be a master lease, or it could be an individual condo. There could very well be the cultural condo, the retail condo, and the housing condo, but, these are matters that we will clarify with, the funding agencies over the next few months.
Thank you.
Ms. Deluz.
Nancy, I just want to say that this is a really exciting project, and I think something that you obviously have a lot of work to be proud of, and I definitely think this is going to be a part of that. You started to answer some of the questions about, and certainly lots of folks in the teams kind of referred to you as being able to answer questions about potential conflicts and or integration between the residents and the cultural piece. If you could just talk about that a little bit more, because I think that's one of the most exciting aspects of this project, but also the one that, as a building manager, I know can create its own set of challenges.
We're actually the most, we're working the hardest to integrate this cultural center with the community and with the residents insofar as they are members of the community. I wouldn't say that there's any, special treatment for any resident because they are lucky enough to win the lottery. This is very much a community facility, and our efforts, are to the community at large. So I guess that's how I would answer that question.
Ms. Efron.
Hi, thank you. Two questions. One, because we know from the demographic work of this department that the aging population in the Bronx is one of the fastest growing populations. If you could speak to that. And the second question is whether you could provide financials of how the Bronx Music Heritage Center would operate as a standalone, since its viability seems pretty central to the viability of at least the ground floor level of the project.
So up until now, we've been raising money to run the programs. We don't charge admission, and we don't expect we will be able to charge admission, at least in the early years. We've retained the services of an outside cultural business consultant, web management, and they've developed a very comprehensive business plan that speaks to potential revenue sources and a 5-year ramp-up period. I can tell you from my own personal experience, having started an organization with 3 people and $75,000, and if you do well, and you adhere to a plan, and you provide programs and services that become respected, that budget will grow. Our philanthropic sources, we've raised over nearly $2 million so for programmatic activity. And, we continue to add new funders, new philanthropic funders. We've also received support from the National Endowment for the Arts, from New York State Department of Cultural Affairs, from New York City Department of Cultural Affairs. So, I think it's fair to say we're tapping all the wells that we know about, and we're continuing to find new ones. So I think that, we start modestly. The hours in the beginning are not, endless hours. They're hours that address the people that we expect will want to come. We expect kids will come to see the exhibits. We know that community members want to dance. I mean, when you ask people what they want to do for exercise, everybody says dance. So I think there are going to be Zumba classes there, right from the beginning. And, questions that have been raised about noise, I think Guido, kind of the way the building is designed, I think that that we won't have them, but we also are not going to have any rock bands, to be perfectly honest. The music performances that we've had so far have been pretty tame. And I think we'll consider ourselves very lucky if 2-3 years down the line, we have a big event once a month and people come to hear music and dance. That's what creating vibrancy is all about. So I think there's just like a legitimate tension between the overarching goals of active streets and creating destinations. And, you know, is it going to bother anybody? Yeah, it'll bother some people. It's sort of what New York is about, you know.
Ms. Levin.
It's a very experienced New Yorker kind of answer. So get over it. If you don't like it, move. But I guess I draw, and I am concerned about the fairly large performance space outside and the possibility for conflicts there. But I guess I draw some comfort from the fact that you're involved in both the residential portion of the building and the community facility portion of the building, and that all the problems are going to end up on your desk, and will have to get solved.
We hope so.
Yeah.
We expect so.
A previous speaker deferred to you for the question I asked about the open space to the west. Could you tell us a little bit about how you think about, among all the other responsibilities you have, how you think about that large open space?
Well, on the, again, this is not property that we own.
Correct.
Or will ultimately be responsible for maintaining, but what we can do and what we plan to do is to landscape it. You know, to landscape it, to plant some trees. There are many sources for trees in New York City, the New York Restoration Project. We've worked with them in the past. So we can do our best to beautify it, and that's what we intend to do.
And will there be opportunities for public access once it's landscaped, or?
It is public.
It is now, okay.
There were a few other things that I kind of were questions that were kind of punted to me. So I can tell you, Les Bluestone informs me that the windows are triple glazed and that the lighting is dark sky compliant. Let's see, we talked about the open space. The loading dock has a common corridor between the dock and the retail. That was somebody answered that question early. And I've already talked about the web management, program strategy. Anything
You probably
else?
haven't answered Ms.
Yeah.
Ortiz's question, so.
Hi, how are you? I too commend the work that you've done in the Bronx, so it's very exciting, and this project is very exciting. It sounds like the financing is in the works,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And so, you know, I guess the question is, you know, the organization is going to have to pay rent. They're going to, or presumably, unless there's some sort of agreement, and if you could share with us the plan, that the capital costs associated with building out the space, could you speak to that and whether you do anticipate this being open? I mean, will it be an open, active space upon the opening of the building, you know, completion of construction, or are there plans to sort of ramp up depending on financing? Like, will this space be dark for a short period of time, or, you know, could you just highlight how you're going to do that as you know, without the financing in place just yet?
We, well, none of the finance for the project, I can say, is in place. It is all unfolding sort of as we speak and over the next few months. But we do have projections about the costs for the space, the core and shell, as well as the full build-out. And those are part of the conversations that we're having with HPD and HDC right now. Mm-hmm. And also with DCA, I might add. And the City Council so far has allocated nearly $7 million to this project. And, you know, we have a request pending with them now. So it's, you know, is it daunting? A little bit, but I think we've got a good head start. And as to whether it will open, I think that we will phase opening. And this is, I think, typical of, so many cultural facilities. I was on the board of the Bronx Museum for 8 years, and there were times when, just hours had to be curtailed because there wasn't enough money. We, hope and expect that won't be the case because we're gonna, we have a head start with our, the program and the operating, experience that we've had and the funding that we've had. So we don't intend for it to be dark. We intend for it to be open as soon as possible, and hopefully with the opening of the residential portion of the building.
Okay, and a follow-up on actually with respect to the open space that's in front, the sort of gathering area. Could you speak to how that will be maintained over time? Is that assumed, is the maintenance assumed, will the building take on that maintenance, the maintenance of that space, or will the organization?
That will be, I don't have a definitive firm answer to this, but it's my expectation that it will be shared between the BMHC and the residential portion of the building. I mean, this is obviously a space that's trafficked by many people, and the goal is that it's trafficked by many people. So it's in everybody's interest that there are multiple layers of maintenance.
Thank you.
Just something minor, since you're kind of working out some of the details now with HPD and HDC, and this might be more directed towards Winifred. But to the extent that there's flexibility to limit the expectations in the underwriting about how much rent is going to be collected from the cultural space, I guess that would certainly help with all of the things that we just discussed. So I just encourage HPD and HDC to do that to the greatest extent possible.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Any other questions for Ms. Bieberman? Thank you very much, and
Thank
good
you.
luck with this.
Thanks.
The next speaker is Ted Weinstein from HPD.
Good morning. My name is Ted Weinstein. I'm Director of Bronx Planning for HPD. As somebody who's been working with Melrose Commons, on Melrose Commons, for Melrose Commons for 20 years, with Winnie, actually Winnie even longer, I feel like this is certainly something that's worthy of the time. But I'd be more than happy to just take the boards down and let you move on with your meeting. And I'd be equally happy to answer any other questions that you might think would be appropriate for us. I would just say that any project of this size and complexity is difficult to put together the financing for. The development team has been very vigorous in trying to get funding from different sources. Obviously, it's a project that we very much want to do, but again, particularly, when a selection is made from an RFP, and then because of various site issues, it takes a number of years to then come to this point in the process. Costs that might have been on paper 6 years ago obviously have changed. So there is a lot of discussion yet to happen about the financing of this project. I always say the figurative bottom line is the literal bottom line on that page. And so that's to happen. But we're hoping that it could all come together so that in the not too distant future, there'll be a closing and construction can start. And again, if you have anything else you think appropriate for me, I'm happy to.
Yeah, I just have one question, Ted, which is what you anticipate as the head of HPD planning with respect to the open space that ultimately Parks Department will assume jurisdiction over. I assume, will that be mapped as parkland? Is it currently mapped?
I presume that ultimately it would be. Just a quick little background. One of the things that the commission approved in the ULURP for the Melrose Commons Site C project, when we did the amending the urban renewal plan, as Winnie described, for both sites previously, we swapped the original urban renewal plan had this area to be public open space, and the west part of the block would be the residential. And some years back, we had a interagency task force, the South Bronx Initiative, which felt that that didn't really make much sense in terms of traffic patterns, that to have the open space close to the heavy traffic really wasn't appropriate. And so we said at that time it made sense. And so that, in effect, is what we did. We worked with the Parks Department at that time to determine, okay, where do we draw the line? Because we reconfigured the urban renewal sites they're not exactly as they were in 1994 when the plan was adopted. And so we worked with the Parks Department. The Parks Department said to us, the furthest west point that could be used, if they were to build a ball field, how many feet would they have to have in order to then have the outfield fence, let's say, for a ball field? And that's what really determined the boundary line over here, between the development site and what would be the open space. But in our discussions with Parks at that time, and up to now even, they've not decided, exactly how they would use the space once they got it. Just 2 or 3 blocks south of here in Melrose Commons, there's another site that in the urban renewal plan was public park. This urban renewal plan had public park designations and public open space designations. And the public park is a site that, after several years of working, we're hoping they'll start construction by the end of this year. And that's just 2 or 3 blocks south of here. Then they would move on and start to focus more on this site, now that the west part of the site is now the open space. Because again, until just a few months ago, that wasn't the case in the urban renewal plan. But I don't believe they have any idea really what they would do there at this point.
Or when.
Or when, right. And then just there was a question about open to the public. Even though the development team is willing to remove it as a blight, I'm not sure that it would be really accessible at that point. It still would be city land. If there's not an active use, it might not be until the Parks Department is ready to start doing something.
Thank you. Ms. Ortiz.
Hi, good morning still. One question. You mentioned an issue of traffic flow. You've obviously looked at, this area comprehensively from a number of different, say, perspectives. One thing that I note is that it's a very strange intersection, right? The streets don't come at right angles, and there's going to be a lot of, presumably, activity here. Has there been thought given to how people will cross? Because I see some potential for pedestrian vehicular conflict, particularly in the very large, open street area where people will probably be crossing from the supermarket and trying to get to the retail, which is right across the street, into the, the venue as well.
Right. Some of this was studied earlier when the Bariqua Village project was planned, which is right across the street to the east. There were some changes in the traffic flow that were then associated with that were required after that EIS. There was an EIS done for this area as well. One of the things, for example,
This is marked as part on the plan.
162nd Street was originally came straight and met Elton at an angle. It wasn't perpendicular. And then 162nd Street was closed. If you go there right now, it's like a cul-de-sac. But one of the things that came out of that interagency task force that we had was that it made more sense to reopen that so that there would be traffic flow. But then in our discussions with DOT about planning for these 2 projects, so they recommended correctly that 162nd Street, when reopened, should curve so that it hits Elton perpendicular.
So
They
it's
felt
less
that
that intersection than in the north, where we anticipate people crossing from, the planned supermarket across, what is that, what is Brook, is that? No. 163rd. 163rd.
Yeah.
There's people cross at the easiest point that they can cross. Are there going to be crosswalks there? Are there going to be, ways for people to get across safely to the open space, which we're hoping they will want to do? On the north side, is that it? Is that?
Yeah, there are,
Yeah.
these are crosswalks.
That's not what I'm talking about. Brook Avenue, you see the Brook, 163rd, that very large, yeah, and Brook, and there's a very large open street element to the north.
Well, this was Brook. It's demapped and it's still physically open.
Do you see what I mean? Where it says Brook Avenue?
This is Washington.
No. To the left.
Up, up.
Go, yeah. there and 163rd, you see that intersection and you know, has thought been given to how pedestrians will cross there? Do we anticipate only having them cross at the corner, but, you know, recognizing that human nature is what it is?
Okay, right now, there is very little pedestrian traffic because there's not much. This
Yeah.
is the site where, and I presume that in connection with this is the site where another development is going to build the shopping center.
Yes, exactly.
So, and then this is a safety zone now that's here.
Okay, I'm just raising the issue that we're going to see a lot of pedestrian traffic, you know, at a grocery store, which is going to generate a lot of activity. People are going to want to cross the street at that precise location. I don't see any easy crossing other than at the corner, but, you know, we may want to think about incorporating another crossing there to facilitate safe passage from the grocery store to the open space and to the new retail, which will be there.
I understand, and I don't know if the EIS addressed that, but we can certainly.
Okay. It would be something to think about.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mr. Weinstein? Thank you, Mr. Weinstein. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? If not, the hearing is closed, and I congratulate both HPD and WEDCO for a very thoughtful project.
Okay. Borough of Manhattan, calendar number 18, CD4, C150147ZSM, a public hearing in the matter of an application for the grant of a special permit concerning 510 West 28th Street parking garage.
First speaker is Jerry Johnson. Morning, Mr. Johnson.
Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. My name's Jerry Johnson. I'm with the firm of Fox Rothschild. We represent 28th Highline Associates LLC, the applicant for this action, which is before you today. The action is a special permit under sections 1345 and 13451 to increase the residential accessory parking on the subject site from 11 spaces to a total of 29. The development site is an L-shaped parcel fronting on West 28th Street, just west of the High Line, extending for 175 feet. The last 50 feet of that 175 feet is an L-shaped parcel that extends to 27th Street. This is the area of the building where the garage is located. The site itself is located wholly within a C63 zoning district within sub-area B of the Special West Chelsea District, which required as part of the development the provision of a primary access easement for the High Line. That access easement has been granted, and it exists on the east side of the High Line and it will be a stair and an elevator providing full access to the High Line when it's constructed. The development itself consists of an 11-story mixed-use building with 40 dwelling units with art gallery and retail space on the ground floor. The automated accessory parking facility, again, is located on the western end, adjacent to the main lobby, concierge and doorman desks. The vehicles are located themselves in the cellar and subcellar levels. The special permit requires a number of findings to be made, focusing on neighborhood character, traffic congestion, the efficient functioning of streets and sidewalks due to the location of curb cuts, and that the proposed number of spaces is reasonable and not excessive in relation to recent trends in close proximity to the proposed facility. The application materials submitted discuss how this proposed automated facility meets those findings in detail. I'd like to focus on two, one regarding the parking study and the other regarding the impact on traffic and pedestrian flow. Parking analysis prepared by Philip Habib and Associates pursuant to the department's methodology determined that the current parking ratio in the special permit's geographic area is currently 4%. With the proposal, currently 3%, with the proposal it'll be 4%. The target rate for that area is 20%, so we're well below the target maximum. With regard to pedestrian flow and traffic, it's not expected that the garage entrance or exit will have any impact on access to nearby public facilities or traffic flow. The entrance and exit to the garage is located on the western end of the building, approximately 150 feet west of the current Highline access point and more than 200 feet distant from when the new access point is constructed. The nearest public transit stops are on 11th Avenue and 29th Street, or 10th Avenue and West 27th Street, over 900 and 300 feet distant. The garage is a residential accessory facility with only 29 spaces. The low number of vehicles, accessory nature, and location of this entrance and exit, and nearby, in relation to the Highline and nearby public transit facilities, is sufficiently distant that the garage will not impact pedestrian flow or traffic to and from the facility. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Questions? Ms. Levin?
Mr. Johnson, do you know yet how your expectation is that all the parking spaces will be used by building residents. Will they be sold separately as condos? Are they monthly leases? Do you know how that will work out?
Yes. It is the garage itself will be a limited common element of the condominium. The leases themselves, in terms of the legal structure, they're actually sold as one-time leases to the unit owners. We assume that most of the spaces, if not all, will be leased to the unit owners themselves. But then they have the ability to do, they have it, but we expect that it's all residential accessory. So if a space in the garage, the special permit or the new regulations allow them to be non-offsite, right? So they can be residential units from other places. They're anticipated that they'll only be monthly. They're not transient. The type of facility, being an automated facility, won't allow it to be operated as a transient facility.
Okay.
So, we anticipate them all to be on-site ownership, but if for some reason a space is sold to somebody off-site, which is a possibility, however limited, it will be like a monthly situation.
That'll be only month to month. But for building residents, they'll make a one-time payment and the space is theirs.
That's as I understand.
As you understand it. Do you have any idea what that one-time payment's going to be?
I have no idea.
Thank you.
Ms. Efron?
If the technology changes so that transient use is possible technically with the self-parking electronic aspect that you have, it would still remain monthly parking or permanent resident parking?
I believe that's correct.
Any other questions? Mr. Cantor?
Yes. I noted the other day that, were you here on Monday?
I was.
Was?
I was.
To the bitter end.
Could you respond? Could you respond to my question with regard to the square footage per car?
Yeah, it's
Only on this.
the actual trays themselves that hold the cars range because they vary in terms of sizes and how they fit in the spaces within the garage and the columns. They range anywhere from 110 square feet, the trays, to 150 square feet. I believe on average overall, if you took all the square footage of the garage and divided it by the number of parking spaces, it ventures close to around 300. But a lot of that is the maneuvering space within the garage required by the robots and the elevator and the access point that added in.
But I believe if my arithmetic was right, you were up around 400, and that was the reason for my question. Did I misread?
I thought when you asked the question, it was for the other garage that was presented before us. Which is why I went and checked our numbers.
Okay. Okay, I apologize.
There you go. Any other questions for Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, we have one behind the other.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson.
Welcome.
Next speaker is Jeff Johnson from Highline Associates.
No relation.
Morning. My name is Jeff Johnson. I'm working for 28th Highline Associates, and I'm here this morning to address the technical aspects of how the system works. Before we get into running through it, I thought I'd bring a couple of photos because we're going to use terms like robot, and so that's what the robot is. It's a battery-operated, automated guided vehicle. It slides underneath a tray. The tray is what cars are parked on, and the cars themselves are lifted by virtue of the tray. The tray is the great homogenizer. It makes all cars look equal to the robot. There's a car seated on a tray. And when you pull into the loading bay, you don't actually pull into a garage floor, you pull in onto a tray. And the tray is then capable of being moved onto a lift into a parking level. So now that you've got some pictures in mind, you enter from the 28th Street side into the loading bay. The loading bay is essentially a single-car garage. It's got a 9-foot door on the street side. There's guidance cameras and a monitor in front of you, and it's a 9-foot door, so you're sort of centered in the right location. And the system tells you forward, back, right, left, so that you position the car correctly on the tray. You get out. There's a kiosk in a little lobby vestibule just outside, and the kiosk will ask you a series of questions. Did you remove the children from the car? The dog? Perhaps grandma? Is the car brake set? Is the engine off? You know, is it in park? Basic safety questions that you would want to answer before you accepted a vehicle into an automated facility. You answer all the questions correctly, you either swipe a card or enter a passcode. The vehicle is scanned to make sure that it is of a dimension that is appropriate for parking in the garage. It won't accept it if it's oversized. Vehicle is accepted, the kiosk says you're accepted, the driver leaves, the outside door closes, the door from the vestibule into the loading bay locks, and another automated door to the lift opens up. A robot slides underneath the tray, takes it into the VRC or lift, and then down to a parking level. First thing it does in the parking level, comes off the lift, it spins it around, because when it goes back out, it's always going to be facing the direction of travel. No one ever backs in or out of this garage. You're always looking at where you're going. And then it takes it into the nearest parking spot that's available for that particular size vehicle. There are 2 levels of parking, and on each of the levels there are 4 locations that are electric vehicle capable. All of the trays will have receptacles where you can plug, the user in the loading bay can plug their car in for charging. Open for questions.
Questions, yes. Mr. Cirillo.
Well, just one comment and then one question, just based on the end of your presentation. I just want to say we've seen many of these types of garages over time. And I just want to thank you for the presentation on how they work, because to my recollection, none of the presentations we've seen have been so detailed and have brought us through both visually and through a description of the process. So I want to thank you for that.
You're quite welcome.
It's very helpful. With that said, let me just jump to just something you ended with. I'm not sure if you were done completely.
Not quite.
But when you talked about the potential charging of a vehicle, which I think is great forethought about, what comes next in the world, does that happen? I couldn't tell. Was that happening at the end once the car got in? There was a place to plug it in, and who would plug it in? Or does it get plugged in on the tray at the beginning, and then it makes its way through?
So it's the latter, and thank you for allowing me to finish my presentation.
Okay.
With the question.
I was going to say, given the education that you're providing to the commission here, could you maybe finish the presentation?
Right, I would love to.
Okay.
So what happens is when you are in the loading bay, if you're an electric vehicle, you have a cord for plugging into charging in public or private locations. And then the tray will have a series of receptacles, because all of these locations on the cars are different. So you'll plug your car into the tray while you're in the loading bay. Because no person is ever allowed into the parking facility.
Okay, that's what.
These robots with the trays and the cars pass within 3 inches of obstructions in one another. It is literally a dangerous place to be. Anytime a door is open to the facility, the entire facility shuts down, because no one can be within the facility, because the robots don't see people. So it's, every door is interlocked. Anytime a door to the facility is open, it goes down. So just to get right back to your question.
Yeah.
So you plug it in. When you're at the kiosk and you're identifying yourself and your space, you're also identifying the fact that it's an electric vehicle.
Okay.
There are 8 locations, 4 on a floor, that are charge capable. They all happen to be up against the outside walls because the robot can't roll over the connectors that make the electrical connection. So we're looking at a system with charge point where there'll be the ability to keep track of whose car is in there getting charged. And we're looking at sometime in the near future where they'll have the capability of saying, okay, the car is now fully charged. We can flip with another car on the interior. So we won't have 8 out of 29 spots electric vehicle capable, but we'll have 16. Beyond that, the sizes of the different parking spaces vary, and it gets a little too complex on the programming to think that you can go beyond that. But 16 out of 29 that's pretty good, and it's probably within 12 months of the facility being completed that software upgrade can be made.
So just as a follow-up to that then, because I was thinking about this when you were talking about the process, but I'll use the example of one of the vehicles that would require electric charge, and they're going to be, let's say, as you said, on the outer walls.
Right.
So certain spots would be for certain cars. How does it maneuver once, if you have an electric car which is on the outer wall,
right,
and the vehicle there's a vehicle, let's say it's full,
right,
all the cars are there, but then you need your car, which is the deepest car in the process.
Right.
What happens? I mean, do all the cars have to move, or is it there's some sort of rhythm to how it?
There is a little rhythm to it. There are actually 5 robots on this particular project. One does nothing but stay with the lift, so that when you come in, you drop off your car, it goes onto the lift, it takes it down onto a floor, it drops it off. Each floor has 2 robots. Let's say your car needs to go into this spot. One of the robots that's not up getting your car comes down, grabs this one, takes it down to the end of the aisle.
Okay.
Lets yours slide in.
Okay.
The absolute worst case scenario is that you're in one of these 2 spots, in which case one of the robots has to take it up onto the next floor or down to the next floor.
Yes.
To get you into those. But the nature of the system is, with frequency of use, your vehicle tends to migrate towards the front of the garage, so that those vehicles that end up in the back are the ones that are most seldom called for. And you do have the ability, using an iPhone app, to warn the system that you're coming to get your car. So while it won't actually bring your car up into the loading bay until you're physically present, because we don't want to bog the system down in case you had to go to the bathroom, the phone rang, some minor, occasion. You can get your car, if it's one of these, you can get that long distance move taken place so that the cycle time is reasonable.
Okay, that's I don't want to, but this is very interesting, and every last point you make is something I was thinking about earlier. So just one more moment, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So 2 quick things. One is, I'm sure you've tested the longest possible period to take the furthest, most trapped vehicle in the system to get it out. So I would ask, what time does that take if you are not in advance notifying the system, but you arrive at the location to get your car, what that time frame would be? And 2, does the system accommodate, and I think you inferred that it did, but that if vehicles can still be potentially coming in and being prepared to be parked while another vehicle inside is being moved?
Right.
So more than the one robot can be functioning at the same time, but they will never conflict with one another.
Right, you could be retrieving a car on one floor while you're parking a car
Right,
on
because
the
it
other
might
floor.
take a few minutes for that.
As a matter of fact, there's several different ways you can program the system. You can program the system for incoming priority, you can program the system for every other, or you can program the system for outgoing priority. Because of the fact that we're looking at a single loading bay, we're going for incoming priority. So that if multiple calls come in, the ones that get answered first are the ones where vehicles are coming into the garage. And we can take the vehicle, get it into the lift, bring it down onto a floor, and we have room to store 2 vehicles on each level before we need to actually have the 2 other robots down below have parked them.
Well, I
So-
think that's good for the community, I mean, just to get the vehicles off the street,
Yes,
which I think
that's
is a
exactly,
great priority.
that's exactly the point.
Yeah.
So this leads to the answer of your question about the cycle times, because the cycle times change depending upon the mode that you're in. But on inbound priority, shortest cycle time is 59 seconds to bring a car down and park it. That assumes it's an experienced user that doesn't have grandma, or the baby, or the groceries, or the big bags in the trunk. This is you drive in, you've done this 10 times before, 12 times before, you're good at centering and you know where fore and after you go. You get in, go out, you hit the questions, and off you go. It's 59 seconds. Average time is 81.5, and then the longest is 192 seconds. So it's not a particularly long process.
Not at all, no.
Those same times basically work on the outbound side just slightly longer because there is that, perhaps we have to move another car. So if there were no incoming vehicles and you request an outbound, 73 seconds is the shortest. Outbound time average is 103 and the longest is 133. And again, you have to add what we call dwell time to that. That's the luggage, that's grandma, that's anything that you're loading or unloading from the vehicle.
Well, I appreciate that very much for your explanation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Knuckles.
Thank you. So, Mr. Johnson, you say no humans are allowed where the cars are actually parked, right?
Other than when the system is shut down for maintenance.
Okay, so if you leave your car, if you leave something in your car.
Right.
And you discover it after the car's been parked.
You have to recall the car to the loading bay. That's the only way you get it out. You're not allowed to go into the, as I described, the vehicles pass within 3 inches of columns and other vehicles. It is not an environment where people belong.
Okay.
There are emergency stop buttons, plastered, red buttons, plastered all over the place on the odd event that you end up in there and something bad is going to happen. Anybody down there can shut the system down. But it's also contacted on the doors, so no one should be able to even get into the environment if it's, if they open the door, it goes down.
I'm thinking of Commissioner Cantor's question he asked at a couple of hearings ago. You want to be the first guy to use it the second time? Is that what you said, Irwin?
There are actually 2 companies out there that are doing these systems, Park Plus and another outfit called Boomerang. I actually started with this particular developer. They hired me to do the due diligence to compare the 2 vendors. And we went with Park Plus, so that was my recommendation and it was accepted, simply because Park Plus is a local presence. They have 6 full-time emergency mechanics, 3 who are specially trained just on this system, and they have these systems up and running. There's one of these on Henry Street in Brooklyn. They've got one going with NYU over at 35th Street. So these guys are in New York, their service presence is in New York, their stock of spare parts is in North Bergen, and they're sharp individuals. I ended up staying on with the developer to help them make sure that things like what priority do we want, the inbound priority, integrating the parking system with the architectural. I'm sort of the guy in the middle. So I've become very familiar with the nature of the system, and I'm pushing the needs of the users to Park Plus to make sure that they give us the system that we want.
And you know of no catastrophes
Not
thus
so
far?
far, not so far. I think the biggest hazard is leaving something in the car.
Right.
And one of the things that's nice about this particular setup, our concierge desk is immediately outside the vestibule where you park, and the kiosk asks you all sorts of questions. So you do have a backup individual who's monitoring that area by camera from the concierge desk. So if it's somebody who looks like they're having trouble or recognizes they're having trouble, there's a trained individual at the concierge desk who can step within 12 feet into that area and lend a hand, check to make sure that there's no one or nothing in the car, help you answer the protocol questions. So,
Thank you.
Mr. Cantor?
Very good.
thank you.
Very thorough question, though. The time frames that you gave us were absent the dwell time. I think you said that.
Absent of dwell time, correct.
So now I'm coming into the garage, I'm parking, I'm stopping up there, I've answered all the questions correctly, and now I gotta pop the trunk and take out today's shopping.
Well, then you have to go back in and answer all the questions again. You've just killed our cycle time.
Well,
You're answering the questions after you've left the garage. Once you go back into the garage, it's going to ask you all those questions again.
Yeah, but take the questions out. In other words, I pulled in,
Yes.
I've answered all the questions correctly.
Well, if you pulled in, you actually have to leave the garage into this outside vestibule. The door closes. It scans the car, it asks the questions, you put your pin in.
After I'm out of the car?
Absolutely, you're out of the car, you're out of the loading bay, you're in a separate space where you do all of that.
How am I physically going to unload? At what point in time?
You would unload once you pull right into as if you were pulling into a single car garage in a regular single-family residence. You get out of your car,
Well,
you help
now-
everybody out, you get the groceries out, and you leave the garage, and the first stop out of the garage is this vestibule where you answer all your questions.
Okay, but what about the guy behind me
The guy behind you is waiting patient
on the city street?
on a city street, yes.
Okay.
Or possibly,
So fundamentally, there's no reservoir.
there is only room for one vehicle in the system
I
at any
understand
point in
what you're
time.
saying.
Hence the desire for us to program it for incoming priority.
For a lot.
But fundamentally, there is no street-level reservoir with this operation. Is it inherent that there would not be a street-level reservoir?
Well, the entry bay
I'm not
is
talking
the
about this job alone, I'm talking.
Right,
about-
but the entry bay is per zoning considered a reservoir space.
So that's one car.
Right, and that's why we're limited to 29 spots. But that's our cutoff. For only having one reservoir.
Okay.
A lot of activity here. Ms.
There's a
Delos.
there's a high volume.
What?
It moves rather smoothly. Once the person is out and unloaded, it moves smoothly. But there can be jams, I'm not speaking to this side alone. It's conceivable that there could be traffic jams backing up on the street, whether it be this facility or another one with the same principle.
If there's no reservoir.
Well, again, it's,
Ms. Delos.
Mr. Johnson, since you seem to be helping educate us on many different things related to this type of parking garage, I'm just wondering, and this is just curiosity, and, you know, what are the capital costs per parking spot in a situation like this? And given that, then what is the minimum size of a garage that makes sense financially?
I can't actually answer to the business points. I know what this particular system costs. I know the size of the system. I know the size of the Henry Street system is very small. I believe Henry Street in Brooklyn is only 8 spots. But I couldn't tell you, I haven't done the math. I'm the technical guy. So I'm here to answer anything technical you could possibly ask. On the money side, if you want those questions answered, we can get back to you on the dynamics for this location.
And just as a follow-up, just on the technical side, then, does each robot, is it normally what a staff person would be doing? I mean, is it a 1-to-1 ratio robot equals staff person in a normal garage of this size?
The exception, I think, here is that you have 5 robots all working with perfect knowledge of one another that never take a break, that don't need to open the doors. That, you know, it's like the software is the maestro, and everybody's moving around in harmony, perfectly matched with their actions. I don't think it's possible to do that with human beings. The system also always knows where your vehicle is. Any normal garage, you go and you give your attendant your ID, they've got to go hunt you up. So there's some, particular advantages in terms of cycle time for something like this versus a manually powered garage.
Mr. Dweck?
Thank you. I'm just looking at the traffic flow and the building entrance. So, I live in a building, so when I bring up my groceries, I'll go get the trolley, and then wouldn't the entrance to the parking lot be better situated more down 28th Street so that the person could have an opportunity to pull up in front of the building, unload the packages, get the trolley, and then put the car into the entrance?
To be perfectly honest, I haven't studied that. When I came on board with the project, this was the basic configuration for where the entrance could be in the building. And I worked with the layout of what we had and trying to make this work the best. I wasn't involved in the decisions of where this would enter into the building and comparatives.
It might be worthwhile to look at, and perhaps you can get the groceries and grandma out of the car.
It's certainly possible to do a street pull-up in front of the lobby conventionally, unload with the help of the concierge,
No, but then you'd have to back up.
or go around the block, as we all do in Manhattan.
Okay.
Ms. Efron?
I just want to build on Commissioner Dweck's observation. Presumably, with the nature of the tenancy of this building, you're going to have a lot of people who arrive at roughly the same time on a Sunday afternoon or evening with bags and stuff. It just seems like the potential for congestion, if you don't have a place to drop off first before you load the car, leads to a real risk of either people leaving their cars and moving stuff manually, or people pushing ahead and then rolling backwards to the driveway. And I just wonder if there's any consideration for the public safety aspect of that for the anyone else using that street.
Well, there's certainly consideration for public safety with vehicles entering and leaving the building, warning lights on the outside, et cetera. There's indicator lights on the outside of the entry that tell you whether the system's available or not. So if you pull up out front, you hit your key fob that would open the garage door. If the light's green, it's available. If the light's red, it's unavailable. If you choose to wait, you hit it, the light flashes to tell you that your call has been recognized, but you need to sit and hold. Some intelligence has to be placed upon the part of the user that they don't create an unsafe situation. It's the nature of the beast. You either need to unload with the concierge at the front of the building, pulled up at the curb, go around the block, one of those options. But certainly backing up on a one-way street would not be advisable.
And double parking, moving
Also,
things
right.
manually is probably
Not advisable.
going to seem more easier for individuals than going around and coming around through the traffic on 29th Street. I just think it's something to be concerned about.
Yeah, your point is taken. It is a small garage. It is 29 spots. Our impression is that the cycles are going to be around 30% of the capacity of the garage a day, and this is based upon a similar facility at One York in New York where it's even lower than that, and other locations that Park Plus has given us data for. So we're not expecting that we're going to have major rush hour influxes or outfluxes of individuals.
May I ask one last question? Are those other projects residential in nature?
Yes.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Ms. Sean?
This is really interesting, so thank you very much for taking the time. I'm just wondering, so, some people, I imagine, might, out of curiosity or whatever other motivation, want to circumvent your policy of not having people in the facility. And I'm wondering, whether through technology or policy, how you prevent, folks who are curious about what's going on under there from actually willfully gaining access?
There are cameras that monitor the loading bay that are always on at the concierge desk, so the concierge can see what's going on. Other than the concierge physically getting out and checking every vehicle each time that there's no one in there, which if it turned out to be an issue and that needed to be done, it certainly can be, because it's not a particularly long distance. It's not like the garage is down on this end and the concierge is over here. That's the most sure way. That's really the only way into the system, because everything else has got an interlock on the door. As soon as you open the door, system's down. So, yeah, you'd have to intentionally stay in the vehicle while somebody else, you'd need a buddy, somebody else
teenagers have buddies
to go out and program the vehicle to let you take a ride through it. So I think that sort of activity would look suspect on the screen of a concierge. I'm thinking it's probably a very rare chance that that's going to happen.
Okay.
There's no sort of motion detector in the system that would detect.
Unfortunately, motion detectors and heat detectors don't work when there's hot moving cars. So we're kind of out on both counts. But yes, I personally have asked exactly that same question. And then
It could be, to just Ms. Zhang's question, not a human being even, it could be a dog or a...
Correct, yep. Yep, that's why we have the protocol of questions at the kiosk that you have to answer to prompt you, hopefully to remember that you left your dog in the car, or whatever.
Ms. Ortiz.
I never thought I'd be so interested in parking facilities. This is fascinating. I share the concerns about the loading and unloading. I think we all live in, the city and we deal with these challenges. You go to Costco and you come back and it takes you 15 minutes to unload your car. It's often a real challenge. So I'm not sure if those questions have really been resolved. But, I'll leave it at that. What happens in the event of a power outage?
The building has a full emergency generator backup, so it goes immediately onto emergency generator.
Okay, so people will still be able to take their cars out in the event, okay, thank you.
And then the robots themselves have 8 hours to charge.
Thank you.
Mr. Dweck.
Just a couple of comments. First comment is, I do like the system, so my earlier question was not intended to say anything negative about the system. I like the overall electronic parking system. Going back to your comment about the camera being only in the loading bay, you're not having any cameras?
There are actually cameras throughout the facility. There's a couple of reasons. Number one is for the user benefit. When you're down in the loading bay and you've called for your car to come up and you're standing there and it's 2 or 3 minutes and you can't tell that the system's running. It's like standing in front of an elevator without the call buttons. You can't see it's on 13 and it's heading down. So right above the kiosk where you enter all of your information, there's a split screen that shows you motion and activity in the garage. There are multiple cameras. That's also patched into the security system and is also out to the concierge.
So the concierge will be able to monitor, like,
Correct.
If anybody intentionally, as Commissioner Jung mentioned,
Yep.
tried to.
No, you'll see the
You'll see people,
activity.
you'll see
in the-
movement.
Yes, you'll see
Fantastic.
movement all the time.
Great, thanks.
I assume you know there's another proposal application before us that's a couple of months behind this one with a curb cut pretty close to this entrance.
Mm-hmm.
Now that application does have a significant number of reservoir spaces, so in and of itself is unlikely to cause congestion on the street. But in conjunction with this application, which doesn't have any reservoir space, isn't there a potential for a great deal of conflict between the two?
I've only learned about the other one recently, but what I was told is that the other project has an entrance on 27th Street, and 28th Street is an exit.
Nevertheless, so there's an exit on the curb cut here is the exit very close to this.
Right, but so if this was an exit here, the
Right.
worst-case scenario is that somebody might pull across their exit while waiting to get in. If a vehicle comes out, they'll have to pull out of the way.
But there could be quite a line, given the no reservoir space for this particular application.
Technically, again, it doesn't answer your question, but technically, again, this is the one reservoir.
No, I appreciate that.
But I understand your question, and we don't anticipate that this is going to occur in any major fashion because of the fact that we're entry priority. We're going to clear them out quickly. We do have one vehicle off the street immediately, and we are giving indication as to whether the system's available or not outside. So,
Well, I'm just concerned, and this is not a question to you, to the sequencing of these applications and the look at what, and I don't know, I have to go back and check whether when this application was filed, whether the other one was, which is behind yours, was known here or taken into account.
I can't answer that. Again, I only found out about this just recently, but just to reiterate, we have the area immediately outside the main entry to the building, right in front of our entrance. So there is space available. This is an exit. That's our entrance. That's our concierge drop-off area. And again, we've designed it to bring cars into the system as fast as the system will allow. So I think we've done what's readily available to us without substantially redesigning the building.
Thank you. Mr. Cantor.
Thank you. 29th Street is an eastbound street, right?
28.
Oh, I'm sorry, 28th is eastbound. How far is your loading area from the corner?
The corner of the block?
Yeah.
Honestly, couldn't tell you. Don't know. 275 feet, thanks to my coach.
Okay.
The other Johnson.
Okay. I don't need the rest of my question.
Any other questions for this Mr. Johnson? Thank you very much for edifying experience for all of us, I'm sure. Next speaker is Michael Sandler from the Manhattan Borough President's Office.
I haven't seen that before. Have you seen it?
Good morning. My name is Michael Sandler, and I'm here on behalf of Manhattan Borough President Gail Brewer.
Are you going to provide us with another alternative technology?
Yeah, no, I promise to be far less interesting than Mr. Johnson. But the applicant has met the findings for additional parking spaces, for additional accessory parking spaces. The proposed garage is unlikely to contribute to congestion on 28th Street, and the garage is only 1 block away from the West Side Highway, which means that parkers here would be unlikely to add to local congestion in the neighborhood. The automated nature of the garage means that it will have a very minimal street presence and will not harm the character of the neighborhood either. As the Borough President laid out in her recommendation, though, the findings for this permit are too limited to fully review this or other more invasive parking facilities. The residential growth study accompanying the application has the underlying assumption that there was an appropriate parking supply at the beginning of the 10-year look-back. The study parameters further assume that a ratio of parking spaces of 20% of all residents is appropriate throughout Manhattan, throughout the Manhattan core, not taking into account neighborhood differences or the availability of mass transit. Furthermore, the neighborhood differences within Community Board 4 mean that the 2012 study, which found that 30% of parkers in Community Board 4 were neighborhood residents, has nothing to say about this study area in particular, or the nature of the spaces that were lost here over that period. Just looking at the new residential buildings that have come in the past 10 years in this study area, those buildings have come with parking spaces for 20% of their residents. It is only when counting the spaces that were lost, which the Community Board contends were never used by residents, that the study finds a need for additional parking. The Planning Commission and the Department of City Planning should re-examine this issue, as the Borough President has asked for in the past, to see if the application guidelines or the findings should be made more robust. That said, regardless of the limitations of the residential growth study, this applicant, who proposes a small garage, has made a good faith effort to meet the findings and has conducted their study as instructed by DCP, and for this reason, the borough president feels that the special permit is appropriate.
Thank you, Mr. Sandler. Questions, Mr. Sandler? Thank you.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Christine Berthet from Community Board Number 4.
Good afternoon by now, Chair Weisbrod and Commissioners. I'd like to briefly, could you pass, I'm sorry, could you pass that out? There is a drawing there. Thank you. Yes. So I'd like to briefly illustrate for you why the application guidelines for Section 13451 of the Manhattan Core, additional parking space for residential growth, do not provide reliable information for you to review or approve special permits. As you know, this guideline requires applicants to demonstrate that the number of parking spaces in the proposed facility is reasonable in relation to recent trends in close proximity with regards to increasing the number of dwelling and the number of public accessory parking space. And the guideline defined as recent 10 years look back. I would direct you to the second page of the package you have. And example 2 shows, example 1, I'm sorry, now I'm losing all my, example 1 shows an illustration. On the left column, it shows that in an area that has 1,000 residents and 16 parking spaces 11 years ago, in 2004, and therefore outside of the study. And if there were no changes since then, an applicant who wants to build 100 residences and 40 parking spaces, as you can see, would not be able to do so. It would not be approved, because the rate of change would have been 40%, which is what is shown in the right column. This despite the fact that even with the new parking, the ratio of parking to residents would not exceed 10%, which is the middle column. So that means in a neighborhood which has no parking, and somebody would come and build a little bit of parking, because of the way the calculation is done, this person would not be able to build the parking because the finding would fail because of the way the guideline is, the methodology is proposed. So that's a case where you could find probably on the Upper East Side, on the Upper West Side, that kind of situation. Now you can do example number 2, which is the reverse. Another example, which is the next pictures, show the reverse case. In an area that had 20 residents and 600 parking spaces 11 years ago, so outside of the study time. And since then, changes plus a new application would add up to 180 residences and 15 parking spaces. The application would be approved because the rate of change would be 8%, which is shown in the right column. This is despite the fact that even with the new residents, the ratio of parking to residences would amount to 307%, way beyond the 20% target or the 30% target in Manhattan. This would be a good illustration of the situation in Chelsea, where we were invaded, the whole space was parking because manufacturing was there before, and then there was no manufacturing anymore, so everybody put parking there to wait until the market would pick up, and then we got rezoning, and then the whole parking now is being replaced with residents, but we are still way above the residential ratio that should be there. So the application guidelines ignore the current neighborhood context, and they prevent adding parking where it's needed, and they allow to add parking where it's not needed.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Questions? Ms. Deluz.
I appreciate the examples. I definitely want to go back and understand, because I guess I understood the 20% not to be about the change, but about to be a maximum allowed ratio.
No, it's not the way. It's the ratio, the change, the ratio within the change is what is the 20% today in the guideline. It's not about what you have on the ground. So when the present applicant, which we all understand has complied with the findings and is probably not an issue whatsoever, I love the technology. So the applicant today will tell you, oh, we are at 4%. But in fact, for the overall parking ratio is at probably 25% or whatever. We have not done the overall ratio because it was not relevant to the findings.
Any other questions? Ms. Levin?
Christine, it's nice to see you again. Nice to see you're still plugging away for parking here. And I think you do, this particular case really illustrates the dilemma that, or the dilemmas that come out of the application of what seemed like, to most people, a rational approach to reform of the parking regulations several years ago when we adopted it, but when you get to individual neighborhoods, it becomes more complicated. There is this other application coming at you, which has a 1-to-1 parking ratio, so I think Community Board 4 will have more fun, even more fun with that one than you had with this one.
Yeah.
But I note that and it really all comes down to how the guidelines are applied in an individual application. And I believe it's the case that those guidelines are indeed only guidelines, and that there's an opportunity, an applicant can present data to justify some different application of the guideline. And I would encourage Board 4 to consider how the guidelines ought to be changed in an individual. This isn't so much a question as a comment for the upcoming application. If there are ways that the guidelines, when applied by an applicant, are wrong, in your view, it would be helpful to have specific corrections suggested so that we know how the guidelines ought to apply in an individual case.
Well, and I appreciate that. However, because the guideline says this is the analysis you have to do, and the applicant has all the resource to hire consultants and do surveys, etc., they are going to have all the information where, as a community, it's going to be very hard for us to go and do a survey for every application and propose the countering information that would be as valid, right?
Yeah, no, but I think in this case, it's really about the application of the data. So even if you accept the applicant's data, your argument is that fundamentally is that the 30% assumption about residential use of the parking in the neighborhood doesn't make sense. That's what the guidelines say you should do. You have a different idea.
I think we have two different concepts. There is the 30% of the usability, which is about this use, but there is also the problem that, measuring the change past 10 years is insufficient. It gives you a very, very small illustration of what's going on, and it's going to tell you have 5% ratio when, in fact, in the neighborhood, you have 25%. So I think there is something really fundamentally faulty about looking at, it's just like you said in your life, well, just look at the last 5 years. Don't go what's before. If the city planning was looking at generally on buildings, well, let's just look at what was built in the last 5 years. You wouldn't do city planning like that for buildings. You have to look at what is in place. And the guidelines today doesn't let you look at what is in place. It tells you to look at the change, not what's in place. Where, in fact, the original guidelines for the Manhattan core was about the overall should be 20%, not just what was changed in the last 10 years.
Ms. Efron?
Thank you for the illustration. I just want to take an opportunity to ask a general question about the community board and parking. And I am not a pro-car culture person,
Right.
but I do wonder how the community board feels about parking inside buildings for tenants or owners owner occupants of buildings as opposed to general parking. Is it a concern that there's too much car traffic on the street? Or is there any positive aspect of an increased retail presence on the far west side of Chelsea, perhaps increasing when there is more car traffic, since the public transportation on the far west side is not particularly handy for...
Well, first of all, there is a guideline of 20%, so we are totally happy with that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have 20% in your building and it's you know, you're using it for your, or 20% within the area, right? So it measures right now an area of what, a third of a mile, and you say within that, if you have 20% and it's in your building, we don't have any problem with that. We would rather not see it as transient. And then the concern we have for sure is like with parkings now close to the High Line, we don't want that to become a car destination to go to the High Line. Mm-hmm. That would be really a major obstacle because the High Line is a highly pedestrian destination. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't be a good idea that now we have all this little parking popping up along the High Line and everybody says, oh, I have a parking, why don't you come here? So you would have more conflict between the High Line visitors and the other one. So it's not, you know, it's not advisable in that specific, you know, it's difficult to have like an overall discussion. It's like on every specific corridor, you have different discussions. But having, you know, it says 20%, it's fine. You know, it could go a little higher, a little lower. I mean, you know, in this building, in this case, I mean, I love your comment about Costco. I mean, the first apartment is going to cost $14 million. I don't know whether people are going to go to Costco. Okay, so I'm not too worried about that. I think this parking is going to use for trophy cars. So that's what it is. So we are, because we have more coming, and because that side of people, there's a lot of construction in that side of the neighborhood, I think it is urgent that we modify the finding, or not the finding, but the application of the methodology, and very quickly put some words or some guidelines out, which so we take back control of, so that you have the information. You shouldn't be told it's 5% parking when it's 25. I think that's a problem. And then you shouldn't be told there is too much parking when in 5 there is 10% parking. That's wrong. That's wrong both ways. So I think we need to make it right, and I ask your help for that.
Thank you very much. We'll look at it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? If not, the hearing is closed.
Borough of Manhattan, calendar numbers 19 and 20. Calendar number 19, CD2, C150203 Calendar number 20, N150267 A public hearing in the matter of applications for an amendment to the city map and for an amendment of the zoning resolution concerning 76 Greenwich Avenue, St. Vincent's Park.
First speaker is, what happened to her? Melanie Myers.
Good afternoon. My name is Melanie Myers. I'm an attorney with Fried, Frank, Harris, Shriver, and Jacobson, representing West Village Residents, LLC, one of the applicants for the actions before you. I think you all know the actions are an outgrowth of a series of land use approvals that were granted by this commission in 2012 for the redevelopment of the former St. Vincent's campus in the West Village. As part of those approvals, the developer was required to improve a triangular site bounded by 7th Avenue, West 12th Street in Greenwich as publicly accessible open space. And as part of those approvals, the developer also agreed that it would agree to pursue 2 follow-up actions. The first of those was to work with the community board and interested parties to see whether a memorial commemorating or memorial to the AIDS HIV epidemic was able to be incorporated into the design of the open space. And the second action was to work with the city to see if the property could be formally mapped as a city park and transferred to the city. The developer was successful in the first effort, and the design of the open space was modified last year to reflect the addition of the New York City AIDS Memorial into the design. And the actions that you're considering today will allow the second commitment to be met. If they're approved, the developer will transfer the parcel to the city, and it will become part of the city's network of parks. We're happy to say that the construction of the park is actively underway. If you've gone by the site, it's actually pretty extraordinary. Trees were planted last week, and I think they're finishing up being planted today. And the main part of the park is scheduled to be open this summer. The AIDS Memorial has been fully approved at this point. It's under fabrication, and it will be opened up a bit later, about 6 months from now. So we're well underway with what will, I think, be a great asset for the neighborhood and for the city. I know there were some questions at the review session regarding the maintenance of the property as it becomes a park, and so I just want to go over that, and we can go into details as you see fit. The developer and the Parks Department are entering into a maintenance and operation agreement that will provide for the ongoing maintenance of the park. The agreement will require the owner of the development on the east side of 7th Avenue to provide for the ongoing maintenance of the park. So today, that is the developer. The condominium will be effective shortly if it's not immediately. And when that happens, it's the condominium's obligation to maintain the park. It was similar to what would have happened if it remained private space. The maintenance and operation agreement will require the owner to maintain it in accordance with park standards, and so there's a fair amount of detail about what that means, but in sort of broad brush, what it means is that the developer will be responsible for day-to-day maintenance as well as sort of ordinary, customary repair as things wear out and replacements of that. If there's some sort of major overhaul of the design that the Parks Department elects to proceed with, then that would not be something that would be the responsibility of the project. But for the project itself, it would. And that's it. I guess the one last little thing I could say about maintenance is that the AIDS Memorial portion of it itself, there'll be an agreement with the AIDS Memorial Foundation to sort of oversee the maintenance of that particular portion of the park. So that will also be part of the maintenance.
That's also an agreement between the developer/condominium association and the AIDS Memorial?
And the AIDS Memorial. So the condominium will be responsible for the overall maintenance, including that portion, and then there was a sub-agreement to allow for that to be maintained.
Okay, questions for Ms. Myers? Ms. Young?
Thank you. I'm just curious if somehow in the future the condo association doesn't live up to the agreement, what kind of teeth does this have?
There are many protections within the agreement. There will be a performance bond that will be put up at the beginning. So there's the ability for the city to come in and draw down. The city can also elect to undertake the maintenance at some point in the future if it will. And there'll be protections in terms of being able to impose liens against the project if the maintenance isn't provided for. So we feel like we're pretty obligated.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Ortiz?
Less a question than an observation and a commentary. Earlier today, we saw a project, an affordable housing project in the Bronx with public space next to it. That project doesn't throw off the kind of revenue that would allow for the improvement of public space and the maintenance of that public space over time. So we're looking at a situation where they're not going to have that opportunity. It's wonderful that this space is being funded. The capital monies are coming from a private developer or project across the street. The maintenance will come from the project across the street. But it strikes me that this is a much bigger question associated with equity and how we as a city ensure that not just the wealthy neighborhoods where there's a lot of land value get the benefit of nicely developed and maintained public space. And so, I just sort of want to say that for the record, it just seemed that the juxtaposition of these two projects today really raised that issue for me.
Any other questions? Mr. Knuckles?
The hours of operation, what will they be?
The hours of operation are set in the maintenance and operation agreement, so I'm going to tell you what I believe they are, because I'm not sure I'm remembering it perfectly. I think that they are during the summer months from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 a.m. to 11 p.m., I'm being corrected, and in the winter time, is it 7 a.m. until 10? Till 11.
7 days.
7 days a week.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Ms. Myers? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker is Christopher Tepper from the New York City AIDS Memorial.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and fellow commissioners. My name is Christopher Tepper, and I'm the co-founder and executive director of the New York City AIDS Memorial. I'm here today, obviously, to speak in favor of the action to transfer the park and memorial to the city and map it as parkland. I started the memorial organization in 2011 to advocate for the inclusion of a significant memorial to the AIDS crisis in the future park, which sits at the symbolic epicenter of the disease across from the former St. Vincent's Hospital, near the LGBT Community Center where ACT UP first organized, and many other important locations in that history. Through the process, as Melanie Myers mentioned, Rudin Management agreed to work with our organization to modify the open space plans to include a memorial in the park if we could achieve all required design approvals and raise the funding to build the memorial and for incremental maintenance. I'm proud to say that the memorial was approved. The design that you have in front of you was approved by the Community Board, Landmarks Commission, the Public Design Commission, and last spring, the City Planning Commission officially approved the modification to include it in the open space plan. And I'm also very happy to announce that we have raised a combination of public and private funds to fully construct the park and are raising a maintenance endowment for the memorial, as well as for programming and educational opportunities to really leverage the memorial site as an educational resource for the community. I'm also very happy to say here, for the record, that Rudin Management has really kept every commitment that they made early on in the process to work with our organization and is doing a really excellent job constructing it. It's definitely added complications to the construction process. Because it's really a detailed work of art is taking, and we announced the commissioning of Jenny Holzer, a really famous visual artist who's doing an installation at the site. We're definitely the last piece that will come together, but I think the wait will be worth having a really important new city landmark and public space that will be the first of its kind to recognize a really important history and chapter in New York City history.
Thank you, Mr. Tepper. Let me just to be clear, the maintenance agreement you will have with Rudin Management / the condominium association ultimately also covers routine maintenance and wear and tear, and then the funds you're raising for an endowment would, in effect, provide the funds that the Parks Department would be responsible for with respect to the park itself, that is more significant improvements or changes or whatever over time. Is that?
I think so, but just to repeat it back to you, we're raising our agreement with the condo association will be for the incremental maintenance, the extra costs that wouldn't have otherwise been associated with the park plan without a memorial of this stature there. And so we have an estimate of that from contractors and are going to be obligated to pay that on an annual basis, that extra maintenance expense. But I think for both our organizational's financial planning purposes, since we are a small organization, but also I think to make people comfortable, we're trying to put a really large chunk of that, like 10 years, in a reserve account so that we're not immediately hamstrung trying to raise funds for maintenance on day one when we'd like to also be developing our programming, but also so that there is a cushion there for many years. But we'll still be on an annual basis, acting as a conservancy-like organization and doing programming and raising funds for both.
So maybe I misunderstand this. The memorial will be responsible for regular maintenance of the memorial itself,
It'll all be one contract, one
With-
maintenance
with the ma-
operator
with the-
who's cleaning everything. And,
okay.
I don't want to misspeak, and I think, if I'm saying anything,
But there'll
John
be
or
one,
Melanie
in other
can
words,
clarify.
one contract of which you will presumably contribute the portion required to, however determined, to maintain the memorial itself. Is that? a
That's
fair
right.
statement?
So there's a fountain, there wouldn't have been a fountain there before. When we bid out the scope, we'll know that incremental cost for that extra maintenance.
Got it. Questions?
Congratulations.
If I may.
Certainly, Mr.
Just
Eady.
To the degree you refer to incremental cost of maintaining the open space in general, I just want to make sure I understood. I had thought that your contribution was for the memorial aspects of the park. And I wasn't sure whether you were saying that due to maybe additional traffic or anything, you're contributing to the overall maintenance of the park due to some incremental costs for the entire open space.
Well, I'll just use the fountain as an example again. Fountains are probably the most expensive thing to maintain in the park just because of the plumbing mechanics and turning them on and off in winter and summer months. Where part of the memorial design is adding quite a large fountain to the park plan, and so part of our obligation is to raise the extra funds for maintaining the fountain, that extra fountain.
Got it. Okay, but it's not anticipated that any of the funds you've raised will be used outside of the, let's call it the footprint of the memorial?
No.
Okay, that's my question. Thank you.
Ms. Levitt.
Yeah, Mr. Tepper, I just want to say, you've come so far in such a short period of time. I think you were late to this party. I remember we first heard about this at the public hearing for the St. Vincent's project, and it was like, whoa, where have these guys been? And it's just really nice to see how much progress you've made and how well integrated you now are into this project. So good for that, and good
Thank
luck
you.
in the future.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Mrs. Tepper? Thank you very much. Next speaker is Erica Baptiste from the Manhattan Borough President's Office.
Good afternoon, Chair Weisbrod and Commissioners. I'm Erica Baptiste, Urban Planner, here on behalf of the Manhattan Borough President, Gil Brewer, in support of the application by West Village Residences, LLC, and New York City Department of Parks and Recreation to establish a park at 76 Greenwich Avenue. The request for a city map change and related text amendments are appropriate and reflect the interests of the residents of the Borough of Manhattan. This proposal is the direct result of impassioned community input during the 2012 ULURP process. The public, the community board, the borough president, and the city council insisted that an AIDS memorial be incorporated into the design of the triangle site and that the LSGD be revised to ensure an open and public park in perpetuity. The application addresses those conditions. Since CB2 is lacking in open space, given its population density, it is imperative that the design of the triangle site allow for passive respite and a visual landscape break from the built environment. A significant part of the design was the center planting bed and water feature, the decorative fence, and the curvature of the beds and paths around the perimeter of the parcel. This quality and the design intent should not be diminished over time, and there is confidence that the space will be well maintained as the DPR is responsible for capital improvements and the developer for the remainder of the LSGD is responsible for all maintenance obligations. At the time of certification, the alteration map included a note to allow DPR to construct small structures such as kiosks, comfort stations, and sheds. However, it is believed that kiosks and comfort stations would potentially be disruptive to the design intent of the space, and that the alteration map is not the appropriate place to convey implicit approval of these structures. It is greatly appreciated that the applicants understood this concern, and after discussion with City Planning's chief engineer and applicants, the note has been revised while providing DPR the flexibility it needs for long-term improvements and maintenance of the triangle site. The application for the city map change, text amendment, and the related minor mod to the restrictive deck represent a significant step toward the completion and provision of open space in the memorial. As a city council member, the current borough president was proud to support the need for an AIDS HIV memorial at the site, given the care so many received at St. Vincent's Memorial Hospital and the importance of the LGBTQ community in Greenwich Village. As borough president, she has continued support for providing funds for the construction of the AIDS memorial and believes this proposal is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baptiste. Any questions? Thank you very much. The next speaker is Colleen Alderson from the Parks Department.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Colleen Alderson. I'm with the Planning and Parklands Division for the New York City Department of Parks and Recreation. We're a co-applicant on this ULURP application for the city map change and the associated text amendment. It's been a true collaborative effort between all parties involved, the Parks Department, the review of the St. Vincent's project, the developer, the AIDS Memorial Group, and I'm glad we're at this point and looking forward to the completed public park. Take any questions.
That was very efficient, Ms. Alderson. Thank you very much. Any questions? Ms. Delauze.
I just want to confirm that all of the things that were stated about the agreements, about the maintenance of the park are to your understanding of how things will work?
Yes.
And I don't know if you have any news you want to share about what's happening in the Bronx with the other park. That would certainly be helpful to know as well. I know it's a separate application. But since you're here.
I am aware of all the associated agreements. The maintenance agreement that the Parks Department has with the developer and the condo association is basically at a final draft stage, and that will be executed and signed before any conveyance takes place. And I'm sure the agreement between, and the city wants to make sure that the agreement between the developer and the AIDS Memorial Group is in place. But yes, everything, only just a clarification on the hours, and of course, the Parks Department has its authority to change the hours should they not be working for the community or what have you, but from April to November 1st, 7 a.m. to midnight, and then otherwise 7 a.m. to 11 p.m. And then for the Bronx, I am aware, I was part of that interagency task force working with HPD and others about swapping the site. And so we are aware of it. It's been a long haul to address Site 32, which is to the south, which Ted spoke about a little bit. It's actually starting construction early 2016. That's been a long haul. Lots of pockets of money that have been added. It's a brownfield site. There were complexities associated with that. There were some buildings still on the property, which HPD took care of, and then with funds, the transfer happened, and we're proceeding. This site is on our radar, and we know it is needed by the community, and with this being the last phase of the development, we certainly will keep it in mind as conversations about the capital budget occur. It is also located in a CPI area, so for those reasons, it is definitely on our radar.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions to Ms. Alderson? Thank you.
Thanks.
Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard on this matter? If not, the hearing is closed, and congratulations getting this done.
Okay, citywide calendar number 21, N150302ZRY, a public hearing in the matter of an application for an amendment of the zoning resolution concerning the special regulations for neighborhood recovery.
Okay, the first speaker is Amy Peterson, who is the director of the Mayor's Housing Recovery Office. Welcome, Ms. Peterson.
Thank you.
Thanks for your patience.
Oh, no problem. Thank you. Today, we're really excited to be here. The zoning text amendment that I'm going to speak to and is being presented is an incredibly important aspect of our program and our ability to move forward quickly and elevate thousands of homes across New York City. So I'll read my formal testimony. I'm Amy Peterson, Director of the Mayor's Office of Housing Recovery. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. Our program, the Build It Back program, is funded by federal HUD CDBG disaster recovery funds. We are helping homeowners, landlords, and tenants across the 5 boroughs, focused mostly in Brooklyn, Staten Island, and Queens, to recover from the storm. The Build It Back program, the Housing Recovery Office, is focused on repairing, elevating, and rebuilding homes across those neighborhoods. In addition, homeowners can get reimbursed for work they did right after the storm, and they can also sell their home to the state and the city. Since we've overhauled the program over the last year, we've made a lot of progress. 1,300 homes are in construction. Almost 4,000 people have gotten reimbursement checks. But only about 100 homes have really started to be elevated and rebuilt. And part of that is all of the complicated land use issues that exist. And one of them is something we're trying to address today, specifically for the elevations and the rebuilds. We expect to elevate or rebuild about 3,000 homes across the neighborhoods. While extensive zoning changes were adopted in 2013 as part of the citywide flood resilience text amendment, what we're talking about today is needed to remove additional regulatory barriers that we've realized are really hindering us over the last year. It will help us elevate existing homes. A lot of homeowners have chosen not to elevate their homes because of the requirements that we're going to try to eliminate today, and also speed the process to rebuild homes. The elevation piece will be greatly simplified by changing the way we document non-compliances and non-conforming uses. Currently, before we can do construction, a homeowner, the existing zoning code actually requires the city, who's doing the work for the homeowner, but the homeowner to prove that their home looks like it did in 1961 when the zoning was, you know all this more than I do. We can't meet this burden of proof. The documents don't exist. If they did exist, they were destroyed as part of the storm. We've been sending people to libraries to look for old maps. We found maps from the 1930s. We've gone through the process of matching 1930 maps to current homes, and the process has been that we actually have to ask homeowners to cut off corners of their homes or pieces of their homes, and it's a cost to us, it's a burden to the homeowner, and it doesn't make any sense, and people are choosing not to elevate. Okay, a little bit more. By allowing people to elevate their homes as they exist and document them in the way that the zoning text amendment allows, thousands of homeowners will be able to move forward and much more quickly. This process has really slowed what is already a pretty cumbersome process to go through. So we're very excited. We went across all of the communities, the community boards, and really heard directly from homeowners. A homeowner in Staten Island stated that the homeowners deserve to keep the square footage they had prior to Sandy as it affects their quality of life, as well as the value of their home. This will allow these homes to be built to help keep the character of the neighborhood. The new zoning envelope has minor changes to allow homes on narrow lots, which many of our homes are, to be a little bit wider and shorter. It's a much better result for homeowners, and it will really keep with the character of the neighborhoods. And then there's also disincentives that are being removed so that people can actually elevate basement space that exists. We don't pay for that, but homeowners will be able to do that, which is something they can't currently do. This text amendment and the work that we're doing is the result of many discussions with civic leaders, community members, elected officials. Borough President Melinda Katz described this amendment as bold, and a good example of what can be done when government works together. Another one of the homeowners said, residents like us should not have to suffer the loss of our homes twice, once to nature and again to bureaucracy. This is great. It's a huge step forward for the city, for this program. I applaud the City Planning Commission and the Department of City Planning for moving forward with this. So thank you. Oh, I can answer questions.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. I will just only add that this is, as Amy alluded to, an extraordinarily cooperative effort among HPD, City Planning, and Amy's office at HRO. And with that, I will open it for questions. Ms. Efron.
I just wanted to applaud you for keeping in mind the low-cost nature of the applicant's experience. I did have one strange question, which is if somebody opts out, but there is another storm and there's damage, is that homeowner then allowed to opt in if it's within the 4 or 5 years of the term of this program?
So any home that was substantially damaged, regardless if they're in Build It Back or not, will be able to elevate per the terms of the zoning text amendment through the period of time. If people opt out of let's not talk about if people opt out and Build It Back and another storm occurs. But people can take advantage of the Build It Back benefits also.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Deleuze.
How are you?
Hi.
I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you plan to get the word out about this change, because obviously, you know, a lot of folks, because of the bureaucracy, may have just thought that there's no chance in hell that this is going to change, and I'm not going to, you know, why go back to that? How do you get the word out? And then should we anticipate any other future potential regulatory changes, any other challenges that you're facing that we might be seeing you back here?
So related to the outreach, there's already been a lot of outreach because of the process we have to go through with the civic associations, the community boards. I mean, we're going to go through the city council step. All of the borough presidents have been actively involved. I've been talking about it at all the civic meetings I've been to, so people both understand it and are excited about it, and there's a number of people who are just held up right now with our architect who'll move forward. We're also going to reach out to homeowners who opted out because we said we were going to cut off a piece of their house and try to get them back in. So that outreach will happen. We are actually going through now a step-by-step process with the mayor's office of operations and the heads of all the agencies under the first deputy mayor's direction at all the steps in the process, because it really is a complicated process to move forward. And so I know we've been working closely with the Board of Standard and Appeals, and there may be something we come back to you on, but at this point, I don't have anything.
Mr. Knuckles.
I'm just looking at the various options here: reimbursement, repair with elevation, rebuild. Rebuild, if the home is demolished and damaged beyond repair, build it back and build a new home that will be elevated and will include the resiliency improvements. In that scenario, over and above the owner's hopeful existing insurance, any incremental cost, does the owner have to bear that, or does the government bear that? How does that work?
So the way that the funding from the federal government works after a storm is FEMA pays the insurance, then SBA often gives loans, and then HUD funding, which is the funding that we're administering, comes in at the end. Many programs in other areas that have had flooding have either had the homeowners do the work themselves and just given them a grant to do the work. That hasn't proven effective. So we actually do the work for the homeowners. Many other municipalities and states also limit the amount of the grant. We have not set a limit except for kind of the FHA home limits, which will ensure that all of the homes will be rebuilt. So the short answer is your question is we do with the HUD funding that we've received. We'll pay the difference above the insurance and the SBA benefits that the homeowner received.
Of these estimated 4,500 properties, do you know approximately how many are occupied as opposed?
I should know that, but I don't. I mean, a lot of people are still out of their homes. A number of people have moved back into homes that have been repaired but just need to be elevated. And then there's a good portion of people who are living in homes that are still kind of, they shouldn't probably be living in, but that's where they're kind of sheltering in place. And I don't know the exact breakdown.
Mr. Cantor.
Thank you. Ms. Peterson.
Hi.
Did you say that the city will pick up, after the federal, you will pick up the balance?
The HUD,
balance.
the HUD funding
Right.
through the city, we pick up the balance to have finished people's homes. Yes,
Are you doing the work or presenting the money?
we're doing the work.
Is that going to be under standard city guidelines?
It is. That's what we're currently working under, and we've recently.
Does that mean you've got to go out for competitive? You've got to draw.
We
plans,
have,
go out
yeah.
for competitive bids and everything with it.
Yeah, and we actually just went out and hired 3 new CM firms for each of the boroughs, who will hire design teams and go out and do competitive procurements. And we're currently trying to get more contractors involved, because what we found is there's contractors who can do a few homes, and there's contractors who can build high rises, but there's not a lot of contractors who can do thousands of homes. And so that's what we've been working with the contracting community to recruit more contractors for.
And at the end of the day, do you think the job will be done for less money or the same money, whether it were done by city or by private industry?
I think it'll be done. Well, so it's private industry, but managed through the city. I think what our program guarantees is the work will actually be done. What's happened in other areas of the country is that you give out checks and they don't actually do the work, and
Right.
it's either
Right.
used for other things or fraud and stuff like that, and they can't finish the work. And so
I'm aware of that, but I guess I'm concerned about the progress that the city has historically made when it came to doing construction. Between an event and a signed agreement for somebody to start can vary from months to years. And what are we doing to expedite?
Yeah,
Or
so.
what plan is there to expedite?
Yeah, so these new CM firms have very tight schedules for design, for hiring the contractors that'll do the work, and then for building the homes. Things like this text amendment and trying to streamline the city approval processes for permits and things like that will help to speed that schedule.
But it all goes out under bid documents.
Yes.
Is this subject to the Wicks law?
It is not subject to the Wicks law.
Okay.
Ms. Levin?
I'm curious to see how the elevation zoning changes that we approved in 2013 have played out. And you mentioned that a number of houses have already been through the process. Are there places you could suggest that if we wanted to see how this is working on a neighborhood basis, we should go?
Yeah, there's a lot of homes that are currently being elevated in Garrettson Beach.
Okay.
And there's other homes across in both Broad Channel and Breezy Point that have actually already been rebuilt. And we can share a list of the homes that we've done. And then within Breezy Point, I mean, there's the fire insurance paid a lot more than the flood insurance. So a lot of those homes have already been rebuilt also.
Okay, thank you.
I would just say it's worth taking, if you have the time and inclination, it's worth seeing, because you can really see the difference in what it means in terms of elevating a home.
Yeah,
and
no,
the-
I'd love to have a couple of intersections that you suggest are particularly useful to visit.
We can get that to members of the commission, because you really, as Amy says, the whole goal here is not simply to restore people's homes to what they were, but to address the challenges of the future. And it's really quite an extraordinary effort that her office has undertaken, really.
Great.
Ms. Efron?
And I just want to say to that point, my guess is you will have more people want to pursue that if their views are being blocked by those in front, and therefore the value of their houses are going down. So my guess is that it's really well designed, and that there may actually be an increase in participation as you go forward.
Yeah, and the timing's really good because the new flood insurance rates are coming out and people are just starting to understand that. And so even people outside of our program are going to realize the benefits to elevating right now.
Yeah, and those of you, we've had a presentation here on our retrofit manual and how important that is in terms of flood insurance in the future and what we all can see coming down the pike. Mr. Cantor.
Thank you. Going back, I fully understand the reason for not giving the money to the homeowner. Okay, that's pretty obvious. I'm still concerned about the length of time that, and it's got nothing to do with this administration or the one before it or Julius Caesar, but it always seems to be that the government process takes a long time, and when we're putting it on top of the long time it's taken us to get here, it's I think, burdensome. Have you guys considered a situation where the homeowner could present documents to you, and then you dole out the money as it's spent?
Yeah, so we do actually offer a choose your, I should have talked about this earlier. There is a choose your own contractor option, both on the rebuild, repair, and elevate pathway. And on the rebuild, they actually do their own plans and do their own building, and we give the money out exactly as you said, as the work's done. They're really struggling, and we've seen that it's hard all along to move that process forward. So that option does exist for homeowners now. It's different from just giving them the check. They have to actually show us plans and things like that, but that option exists now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for Ms. Peterson? Thank you very much. The next speaker is Deborah Morris from HPD.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Thank you to the chair and for the commission and for staff for this opportunity to speak in support of special regulations for neighborhood recovery. My name is Deborah Morris, and I am the Director of Resiliency Planning at New York City Housing Preservation and Development. As Amy mentioned, Build It Back is the city's program assisting homeowners, landlords, renters, and tenants affected by Sandy within the 5 boroughs of New York. For Build It Back, HPD manages the repair of multifamily structures, a multifamily resilient retrofit program, a rental assistance voucher program, and the reconstruction of homes that were completely demolished or destroyed by Hurricane Sandy. This text amendment comes out of a collaborative process with DCP staff, the Board of Standards and Appeals, and the Department of Buildings to resolve the challenge of successfully permitting the reconstruction of single-family homes. In the aftermath of Sandy, Executive Order 230 suspended zoning provisions to facilitate reconstruction of non-compliant and non-conforming space in accordance with flood construction standards. And the subsequent passage of the 2013 Flood Resilient Text Amendment allowed for the reconstruction and elevation of non-compliant space, but only such that the non-compliant space was created in the same place, only elevated. BSA Special Permit 6492 was created as part of this package of zoning relief for victims of Hurricane Sandy so that we could restructure building form on the lot. To manage the large volume of homes requiring reconstruction in the most storm-affected communities and to meet the time limitations of CDBG funding, HPD determined that using standard building prototypes was through pre-qualified developers, which is a little different than the repair program, would simplify and expedite many aspects of design and construction. However, due to the varying sizes of properties that are registered in Build It Back, it's not possible for the standardized prototypes to exactly match the dimensions of the pre-storm home that they are intended to replace, nor is that often a desirable outcome. I'm going to speak in particular in favor of the proposed envelope modifications for the small and narrow lot and shallow homes, which will allow Build It Back to build better and more usable and more contextual homes. These provisions were designed with an understanding of the envelopes that our program has designed and taken to the Board of Standards and Appeals for approval for over 30 special permits. We've worked closely with DCP staff to find a building form that can both provide relief for building homeowners in neighborhoods most affected and suit the neighborhoods that they will be used in. And although we want to recognize the Board of Standards and Appeals for its continued assistance, we believe an as-of-right build option will better expedite recovery for hundreds of homeowners. As others have mentioned, many storm-affected communities are poorly documented in official records, and it's been extremely difficult to find any kind of record about a building's legal noncompliance. The proposed simplifications that for demonstrating noncompliance and using a tax lot as a zoning lot to show noncompliance and nonconformity will go a long way to reducing the administrative and technical burdens that have delayed reconstruction. I can take questions. 2.5 years after Sandy, there's an urgent need to assist homeowners so they can move forward with recovery. We hope the Commission will approve these special regulations. Please let me know if you have any questions, particular to rebuilds, which are a little bit different in their administration than the elevation program.
Thank you, Ms. Morris. Questions for Ms. Morris?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very complete. The next speaker is Joshua Saul from the Board of Standards and Appeals.
Chairman Weisbrod, Commissioners, good afternoon. My name is Josh Saul, and as a project manager for the Board of Standards and Appeals, I'm actually accustomed to sitting back there as opposed to being here testifying. Today, however, I stand before you to testify in favor of the special regulations of Neighborhood Recovery Text Amendment on behalf of the BSA. Over the past year, the BSA has worked hand in hand with Build It Back to assist homeowners in rebuilding homes that require modifications of existing bulk regulations because the existing provisions are insufficient. During this time, the Board of Standards and Appeals has granted more than 30 such applications and reviewed dozens more at the staff level. While the outcome is high-quality, resilient homes that improve upon previously existing conditions, reviewing these applications requires time, resources, and coordination. Each application before the BSA, under the special permit that Deborah Morris mentioned, undergoes an in-depth zoning analysis and a careful examination of neighborhood character. Additionally, these applications often involve interagency troubleshooting on a case-by-case basis to resolve outstanding issues affecting the subject sites. For most sites currently under review, proposed text will obviate the need for BSA involvement during the rebuild process. This, in turn, facilitates as-of-right solutions that meet flood-resistant construction standards. In addition to streamlining rebuilding efforts, the amendment will also allow BSA and Build It Back to more effectively focus their resources on uniquely burdened sites where an as-of-right solution is not feasible. This produces an outcome that is desirable for all parties involved. On a separate matter, I'd also like to note that we have reviewed and fully support the proposed BSA special permit 64-A71 for establishing nonconformance with regard to the number of existing dwelling units. Similar to the proposed findings for the special permit, the board regularly evaluates documentation used to substantiate timelines for previously completed construction. Accordingly, the board will continue to use its expertise in examining these applications under the proposed special permit. In closing, we'd like to affirm our support for the proposed text amendment, as well as thank the Department of City Planning and other agencies that have been involved and have worked very hard on this amendment. If the Commission has any further questions, I'd be happy to answer.
I have a question, maybe, of the 30 applications that you've processed so far, would any of those have been avoided had this text amendment been in place?
Correct. So much of the analysis that DCP did hand in hand with HPD as well as with us is look at those sites that they had to bring to the Board of Standards of Appeals, often that were narrow lots or shallow lots, and shape this text around solving those issues so the process could be expedited without BSA involvement. So a large percent of those would be, as well as many more that we have reviewed in pre-application but had not come before the board. This text amendment would make them as of right.
And so all of those, I assume, were brought by private homeowners who had to pay lawyers, architects, and whatever, or were they brought?
So most of the cases so far have been brought by Build It Back.
Build It Back.
In HRO. We have had some pre-application meetings with owners that are either choosing their own contractor or are outside of the Build It Back program and are working with private architects. And so that's an additional cost to the homeowners who have already been facing quite a hardship in just getting back to their homes that this zoning text will obviously help with.
Thanks. Questions, Mr. Knuckles?
I'm just wondering, have any applicants been denied by BSA who might otherwise, who under the text amendment, assuming it's approved, could proceed with the renovation?
So no applications have been denied, and that's mostly thanks to the fact that we've worked very closely with DCP as well as the HPD to make sure that the prototypes and the location, the siting of the homes within the zoning lot fit within the neighborhood character and meet the findings under the special permit that the BSA has to modify those bulk regulations.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Cirillo?
So understanding the general criteria that BSA follows in making these types of determinations, is it safe to assume that the hardship would be not permitting the structure to be rebuilt under the pre-existing non-conformance? How did the findings get met? Although I'm pleased with the results, I'm just questioning the analysis and the process, just to understand it.
So for the special permit that we've processed, the findings have to do mostly with neighborhood character, and in many cases, the applications that have been brought forth actually improve upon the previously existing conditions to have the homes increase, for example, yard conditions, rear yards, in a way that improves the neighborhood character. In terms of other findings, it has to do mostly with practical difficulties or hardship, as you mentioned.
Right.
And these are quite, I think, to the board and to most people, when you examine these sites that are 20-foot wide lots in low-density residential areas, they're substandard lots. They're very difficult to comply with the existing zoning.
Okay, and so when those that were granted favorable determination by BSA, the homeowner will end up with the documentation that supports the legal nonconformance now looking forward, right? So they will now have some new documentation that protects them at least within the legal nonconformance category of their property.
Correct. It would be a grant. Now, just a clarification, you're speaking about the existing special permit that we've granted for bulk, correct? Not the proposed non-conformance special permit.
No, what you've
the
already
existing, what we've granted.
Right.
So, right, the BSA issues a resolution, and it's tied to that zoning law, and they can build to that envelope that we've approved.
And it protects them, okay.
Sorry?
That's perfectly fine.
Yeah, I should add that, given the complicated nature of zoning and interpreting zoning as well as noncompliances, one of the problems we've faced is different interpretations of how you apply particular Article 5 in constructing these homes and how you deal with existing noncompliance in these rebuilds. There have been lots of different interpretations, and we've had issues moving forward after grant with DOB to have the permits issued so they can build to the specifications that we've approved.
Okay, I guess my ultimate concern was at the end of the I know what a homeowner will end up with in this process. I just want to ensure that those who preceded under a different process will end up with the same legal protections insofar as the nonconformance is
Correct.
concerned.
And
Thank you.
Ms. Efron?
It just sounds like it's a win on so many levels. Just confirming that it's allowing a potential backlog at BSA to no longer be a backlog, which helps all citizens of New York who come before a BSA. It helps build it back, streamline its process, and HPD as well. But also, in the future, the city or the taxpayer's obligation for dealing with storm recovery will be greatly reduced, and therefore it's a great reallocation of budget of potential future tax payments for so many residents in this city, if not all. So it sounds like a very exciting and happy outcome to a really tragic event.
Indeed.
Any other questions? Well, with Ms. Efron's excellent summary, I would say that we would like, given the urgency of this, we'd like to vote it out in 2 weeks so that this can be implemented as quickly as possible. If you have any questions, let us know and we'll answer them, but we really want to move this as quickly as possible. And as you know, we have gotten very, very strong support from neighbors throughout the city that have been affected. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. And again, apologize for the amount of time that you had to spend here instead of building buildings. Is there any other matter that has to come before us, Madam Secretary?
Do you have any more speakers? No, Chairman Weisbrod.
Okay, then the hearing on this matter is closed, and we can adjourn this session. Okay?
Parking, chickens, robots, quite a week.
Who would have ever known? You got the variety.
I think the feathers metaphors of
Yes, but, the mic is
None of us are chickens.
Yes,
We got
you can take that.
They already
Fails to be able to
recognize that all like to go see our house.
I've never parked cars.
No, honestly, did Trey, I guess. Yes, we have some problems with driverless cars, spending, and I think she also had a location. It's actually been, right, but driverless cars, So that's the problem. Like every place kind of doesn't pipe out there. So, but if you have a tray, it can go over. So that's fascinating. We also have